My mom and dad were married in Michigan and divorced when I was 2. So I really don't know my parents to have had a relationship together, but they were really good co-parents. And then when I turned probably around 12 or 13 years old, my mom graduated from X-ray school and we moved to Texas for work. I found myself being very alone in the beginning, especially through middle school. But we made it, and I don't think you could pay me to go back now. I graduated high school in '99, and I wanted to be a police officer. I'm not quite sure what motivated me to go down that route. I've always been kind of a square, never been a rule pusher or breaker, so it was just kind of a fit for me.
In 2002, 21-year-old Amanda Siggers is in her second year studying criminal justice at San Jacinto College in Houston, Texas.
I was a young girl that had the world at my fingertips, really. I was having a decent time with my friends, exploring the city and just living life. One day, a friend and I were preparing for a test, and we chose to go to a local bookstore, coffee shop, and study. We happened to look over, and there was this guy sitting at an adjacent table. He was very handsome. After a while, conversation ensued with him.
25-year-old Cy Ghosh tells Amanda and her friend that he works as a pharmaceutical sales rep, but intends to go back to school.
Cy had told me that he graduated from UT with a pre-med degree. He applied to get into Baylor College of Medicine, and he was accepted, but he denied the acceptance and ended up venturing into something else. He eventually got both of our phone numbers, and I thought for sure he was going to call her, but he ended up calling me. And I was ecstatic. The beginning of our relationship was very fun. So I was very much a gentleman from the word go, and he really just laid out the red carpet.
He was very, very polite, very cordial, pretty much like Amanda had told me. He was a tall, handsome man, and I knew that she was, she was very smitten.
Culturally, he was very different from me. I found him to be very interesting. Even though he was raised here in the United States, he had a lot of Eastern values. His parents were first-generation Indians. I got to learn a lot about the temples and just the peaceful nature of Hinduism. It's such a beautiful culture. He told me that his father and mother were divorced, and prior to us getting together, he had moved out of his father's home and into his mother's home. He was very uncomfortable at his mother's house. She would consistently be on him, nagging him about something, mostly his career, because in that culture, career and education is number one. They generally live in the home for quite some time, even after college, in an effort to save as much money as possible. And so he was, staying in the house even at an older age because that's culturally just what was of the norm for them. Cy's mother's name is Lipika. She was very much about money, prestige. She didn't care for the union between Cy and I. He relayed that message to me, and I feel like she wanted him to marry an Indian woman and not a white woman. But we chose to look past it. 3 months later, she realized that he was serious about me because he actually brought me home, and we ended up staying the night there. And she opened up the door, and I was there. She shut the door very fast, and Cy had to go put that fire out. She was very vocal about me being a white bitch, and she didn't want that white bitch staying the night in her house. It was certainly a shock, but I knew that he wasn't going to listen to that. I knew how he felt about me, but it was very hurtful. We ended up leaving, and I don't believe I ever stayed the night there again.
Cy's dad, on the other hand, welcomes Amanda with open arms.
Cy's father, his name is Biz. I did not feel like he was racially against me or us being together. I felt like he genuinely wanted to see us succeed in life. He was just a very kind soul.
In late 2002, Biz asks his son and Amanda to come live with him and his current wife, Kay. He has been diagnosed with terminal cancer and wants to spend his last days with his son.
The first few weeks were good. Kay was on board with everything. She knew that we were there to help and not to hinder. But then it started to decline. I could tell that there was tension between Kay and Cy. Cy went on to tell me that Kay would say false things about him. Eventually, it felt like I was walking on eggshells everywhere I went. One evening, Kay cornered me. She said, "You have no idea the person that you're getting involved with. You have no idea who he is, and I would highly encourage you to stay away." At the time, I thought, whatever, I'm in love, and he's so good to me, and he has nothing good to say about her, so it tainted my ability to really take her seriously.
Despite the tension, all three focus on caring for Biz. Until his death in July of 2003, Cy is inconsolable.
He was devastated. Biz was a primary force in his life, and once he passed, I think that Cy felt empty. I think he felt scared. Very different, mentally very different.
Things come to a head when Amanda finds something suspicious in Cy's car.
I found a box of condoms, and it prompted a lot of questions. He became defensive, and it led to a horrific argument, and I started to get a little bit scared. And I had attempted to make a phone call, and he ripped the phone out of the wall. So I made my way to the front door, and I pushed the panic button on the alarm, which immediately sends a call to 911. So I knew that they were on the way, and he knew they were on the way as well, and he left. So the police showed up, and I let them know what had transpired. I did not press charges. It was hours later that he came back, and I vividly remember just being so upset that he was gone, not knowing what was going to transpire, if we were breaking up.
Cy begs Amanda's forgiveness, and Amanda rationalizes that he is deeply grieving and not acting like himself.
I forgave him, and we just chose to ultimately put it behind us. I had a lot of big hopes for our relationship, and I wanted things to be normal again. So I just made it okay. And we were fine. We were fine after that.
In 2005, Amanda and Cy decide to take the next big step.
I was very happy for my daughter to get married. She was very happy about getting married.
And by this time, Cy's mom has accepted Amanda into her son's life.
So we had a Hindu ceremony at the Meenakshi temple, and 2 days later we had the Christian ceremony. My family came to the Hindu ceremony. I had to wear a red sari, red and gold. It was absolutely beautiful.
The highlight was when I saw them walking towards the limousine to spend the rest of their lives together. That's the way it was supposed to work.
I felt like my dreams were coming true. We were in forward motion.
Cy applies to medical school, and life seems on track. Until he does an about-face and pressures Amanda to change her career.
It came out of left field for sure. He was very adamant that being a police officer, that was a blue-collar job. It wasn't acceptable to him or his family, and he made it very clear that it was not where he saw his life going.
Instead, he wants her to go into healthcare as well.
I was to go through nursing school, and we were going to open and run a practice together. In theory, it was the fairy tale. I caved in because I felt like he knew better than I did. He was 5 years older than me, and he had a plan.
Cy chooses a podiatry school in Des Moines, Iowa, and Amanda gets accepted into a nearby nursing school.
When they moved to Iowa, they were about 10 hours closer to Michigan, I think, so I could see them more often. I would take the train over, help her decorate. And I love doing it. As a father, it was great for me to be able to do that.
But Amanda doesn't adapt well to her new field of study.
Well, I was in a clinical setting one day, and I ended up passing out. And that's when my professor pulled me to the side and said, you know, you may want to rethink your career choice.
She said, Dad, I really want to do it. But she knew that she couldn't do it because she couldn't stay on the side of blood, so.
Amanda decides to withdraw from the program.
When I told Cy, he didn't react well. He made it very clear that he was embarrassed by my decision. He told me he was very disappointed and that I needed to do it. I stood my ground, that I wanted to do something else. And ultimately, he had called me white trash and bitch and wished that I was dead. That's when I realized that I had made a mistake.
When Amanda Ghosh quits nursing school, her husband Cy becomes verbally abusive.
But I'm a loyal soul. I'm very loyal to my mate. And I chose to stay. I didn't think that there wasn't anything that we couldn't fix. I took my vows, my marriage vows, very seriously.
Amanda forges ahead despite Cy's disapproval.
I took all of my criminal justice and nursing courses and wrapped it into a general studies degree, basically the highest level associate degree you can get from a junior college, and I moved on. But I didn't feel proud of that accomplishment, actually. Cy belittled me because it wasn't good enough, and so I felt like a failure.
And I felt that there was things going on that I didn't know about, which relayed into their marriage some friction.
He definitely made me feel devalued. I felt alone, I felt isolated, I missed my family.
And then, a call from out of the blue brings family directly into Amanda's life in an unexpected way.
Amber was my half-sister. She was born to my dad and my stepmom, Joyce. She was 4 years younger than me, almost to the day. The only sister I've ever had. And as she got older, she became dependent on drugs. We went our separate ways.
While struggling with addiction, 21-year-old Amber gives birth to a baby girl, Kelsey. When Kelsey is a few months old, Amber is ordered by a Michigan judge to enter rehab for 90 days.
The paternity had not been established on Kelsey. And I received a phone call from CPS asking me if I would be interested in doing a temporary foster placement for my niece. It was a no-brainer for me, but I wanted to make sure it was okay with Cy to bring her into the home, and he agreed.
In January of 2007, Amanda travels to Michigan to get her niece.
When I first saw Kelsey, she was only 11 pounds at 7 months old. I knew instantly that I was never going to give her back.
Amber was not capable of taking care of a child, but Amanda was, so I was happy that Kelsey was in a safe place.
I knew that I was on the path that God had laid out for me. She was a sickly baby due to being born addicted. She cried incessantly. It is very hard to deal with a baby that never stops crying. But somehow you figure out how to deal with it.
Amber didn't finish her rehabilitation, so the court awarded Amanda to keep taking care of Kelsey.
Even though he never said it, I think Cy felt like he had made a mistake. I think he quickly realized that the responsibility of a child was far more than he anticipated. Unfortunately, it wore Cy down over time. I was doing the laundry one day and the baby was crying. I walked around the corner and he was shaking her violently. I was shocked. I couldn't believe that he was doing what he was doing to such a tiny, fragile little baby. I was just blown away. And it was in that moment that I knew I had to leave. He has absolutely crossed the line. I need to get her out of there. He didn't deserve the title of being a dad.
In May 2007, Amanda moves back to Houston with Kelsey, leaving Cy behind in Iowa.
I was gonna take care of this baby. That was my mission. Why the career choices that I had made and why it didn't pan out. I knew that I was supposed to be Kelsey's mom. I was able to find a townhouse apartment right next door to my mom, which was extremely helpful because she was able to help me with the baby. I got a part-time job so that we could survive. Somehow we made it work. All of a sudden I became a single mom. We were divorced in December of 2008. He filed for divorce and it was uncontested. It was easy, 2-page divorce. I felt like it was the worst thing that had ever happened to me, but probably the best thing that could have ever happened to me at the same time. It was such a weird feeling.
Amanda enrolls in a sonography program for training in ultrasound.
I felt very confident. I found my independence. I was going to school and I was working full-time. Kelsey was going to daycare and thriving in daycare. We were happy. I was free of all of the dysfunction that I had lived in for so long.
But Amanda's newfound peace will not last for long.
So I moved back to Texas in December of 2009, early 2010. And that's when the stalking began.
I can't imagine what that would feel like to be victimized, stalked, harassed, knowing there is a weapon involved. This behavior can't go on forever. When is somebody gonna break?
Amanda Harris has moved on with her life, while Cy flounders.
Ironically enough, he decided that medical school wasn't quite right for him.
Cy drops out of podiatry, converts to Christianity, and returns to Houston.
One day he called me and told me that he had obtained a job at a pizza place near my apartment. And I thought, why in the world would he take a job delivering pizzas? And then it dawned on me that he could drive in and out of my apartment complex on the daily, on the hourly sometimes. I found it to be bizarre behavior.
He's a pizza delivery driver, where being a law enforcement officer wasn't good enough for her. Now he's going to drive and deliver pizzas, not because he wants to, but because it allows him to have the freedom to drive by and check on her whenever he wants to.
In early 2011, 2.5 years after her divorce, Amanda moves to a new home in a new neighborhood and doesn't share her address with Cy. It's a new beginning.
I was encouraged by my friends to get out there, so I put my profile up on an online dating site and I met Wayne.
Wayne Harris works in the motorsports industry and, like Amanda, is divorced with one child, a boy named Nick.
So I met up with him and he thought he was an attractive man and our conversations just flowed so well. I just knew right away. I was so ecstatic to feel this feeling again, to know that I was capable of feeling, you know, the joy, the butterflies again. And he was as well, that we just didn't miss a beat. We decided that we were gonna see each other the very next day, which turned into the very next day and every day thereafter, unless he was out of town for work.
And I thought he's just a fantastic guy. Real nice to be around, very energetic.
So Super Bowl Sunday rolled around and Wayne came over that evening and I was cooking and I would oftentimes let Kelsey play at the park right there because I could see her. She's basically within arm's reach of me. So Kelsey's playing, Wayne and I are talking, and I get a knock at the door, and it's the police officer that lives on site. He had received a call from a concerned person letting them know that I let my child play outside unattended.
Amanda invites the officer inside to discuss it, embarrassed that her new boyfriend is a witness.
We all had conversation. Wayne had conversation with him. We were all in agreement that she was certainly within an eye shot, ear shot, arm shot of me and that she was perfectly fine. I asked the officer who had made the call, and he couldn't tell me, but I knew in my gut who was at the root of this. I felt frustrated. I felt violated again. It's a very uneasy feeling to know you're being watched. At this point, my relationship is blossoming with Wayne, and I didn't let him know everything that was going on because I certainly didn't want to taint a good relationship with my baggage and drama. I didn't want to bring that into the relationship.
Amanda's strategy is to block Cy completely.
I figured he didn't get his way. Hopefully he'll move on now, but that never happened. And he knew exactly what button to push, which was going after my daughter.
It has been 5 years since Amanda took custody of Kelsey. Now, as Amanda is on the verge of becoming Kelsey's legal mother, Cy starts to stir things up.
What he did is he cleverly went to a therapist, told the therapist all of his grievance toward me, and made me out to look like a neglectful mother. And it was her duty to call CPS by state law. I received a phone call from CPS that they were going to interview my daughter that day. I felt mortified, and as soon as she stepped foot in my door, she realized quickly that Kelsey was just fine.
I just couldn't believe that he did that. It was like, when does it stop?
Kelsey, the adopted daughter, is the reason she left him in the first place. So by calling CPS, if that worker had not done a thorough and proper investigation or had just rushed to judgment, then Amanda could have very easily lost Kelsey. And for all intents and purposes, her niece, who is now her daughter, is the most important thing she has. And it would have been devastating.
Concerned that Cy's unpredictable behavior is escalating, Amanda seeks help from the local police.
I don't think it's ever going to go away, and I honestly have no idea how to deal with it. I've gone to the police department at this point. I've talked to officers that have asked me to just ignore it, and as long as he doesn't put his hands on me, there's really nothing they can do. It's very frustrating. I felt horribly harassed, unprotected, and you feel so helpless.
Wayne steps up and asks Amanda and Kelsey to move in with him on the other side of Houston.
It was the best feeling. I felt Kelsey was going to have a great role model, a great father figure. Moving to the north side of town was good because I didn't know where I had gone. And so the stalking had come to a halt for a short period of time. Life was actually going really, really well.
It was very comforting to know that she was with somebody that was safe, and Kelsey too.
That all changes one night when Wayne is away on business.
I woke up to gunshots outside of my bedroom window. I knew he was out there.
In 2012, in the Houston suburb of Tomball, Amanda Ghosh is awakened by gunshots outside her window.
I immediately called the police.
She did not see Cy shoot the gun, but she did see him get in the car. When that happened, well, that's when I really became concerned.
When they showed up, he wasn't there. They checked the perimeter of the home. They didn't find any shell casings. They spoke with the neighbors. None of the neighbors had heard any gunshots, and so I kind of felt like they didn't believe me, and it really went nowhere.
Amanda is on high alert, and it's not long before another incident occurs.
One night, Wayne and I were sitting in the living room watching TV, and our dog ran to the window and was barking his tail off. So I knew somebody was out there, and I had a feeling that it was Cy. Wayne hopped up quite angrily, and I encouraged him to just settle down for half a second, let me call the police and get them there this time so that they could witness what was going on. They were right around the corner, so it only took a couple of minutes, and they caught him there. Thank God. This time, he had finally been caught, and they issued him a trespass violation and a warning. We actually felt good after that for a while. We didn't see him for quite some time after that.
With Cy in her rear view, Amanda commits to her bright future.
We decided to get married on 12/12/12 at 12/12 at the Justice of the Peace.
They were very, very happy. And in fact, at the time that they got married, they adopted Kelsey at the same time.
I had been fighting for custody of Kelsey for the better part of 7 years. It was quite the process, but we'd finally gotten there. And then 2 days later, I found out I was pregnant for Gemma.
It was great to see. Wayne wrote notes for the unborn baby for her to read later on and, when she grows up. So he was very, very excited about being a new father.
Gemma was born with a very, very rare condition called bacterial association. She was born with only one kidney, as well as no esophagus, a cardiac defect, and a vertebral defect. Needless to say, she required 24/7 attention, care.
She was a perfect little child. Of course, all of my grandkids were perfect. They are a blessing.
About 1.5 years after Gemma was born, we moved into this beautiful home that neither one of us thought we would ever be able to live in. And here we achieved it. We were on top of the world at this point. Christmas Day, 2015, we woke up rather early with the kiddos because they were just super excited. And we just sat down to open our gifts, and I hear a tap at the door. And who else but Cy?
Cy tells Amanda that he would like to pray with her and her 2 daughters.
I just couldn't believe that he even came back around, especially at a time when the family's getting together for Christmas.
Wayne came unglued that day. He escorted Cy off of our property with a lot of profanity and a lot of anger and aggression.
Cy's stalking has been going on for almost 6 years, ever since Amanda decided to leave him.
There are some individuals who cannot take no for an answer. They cannot move on and regain their sense of balance until they're back in control again. Maybe if Amanda were to run back to him and he could say, "No, I don't want you," then he would have control again and he could move on. Right now, none of the decisions are his, except the ones that he uses to torture and drive them crazy.
She is aware of Texas's strong stand your ground laws and asks the police for more information about self-defense.
So I asked the officer what my rights were. If I had the right to hold him at citizen's arrest until the police got there. He told me that we definitely had that right.
Wayne owns a gun and suggests Amanda buy one too.
Wayne encouraged me to go get my license to carry and buy a weapon to protect myself due to all of this incessant harassment, stalking. So I took a few classes and tried to become as capable with my weapon as possible. June 28th, 2017 was Kelsey's 11th birthday, and she chose to just have a she day. She chose to do all kinds of things like get her nails done, get her hair done, very girly stuff.
Amanda, Kelsey, and Kelsey's friend Georgia meet up with Wayne, his son Nick, and baby Gemma at Kelsey's favorite restaurant.
And after dinner, Gemma was exhausted, so I asked Wayne to take her back home so that I could finish shopping with Kelsey and her friend for her birthday. So he obliged and reached over and gave me a kiss, a really long kiss. The kids were in the background ewing. I'll forever remember it. I stayed at the mall with Georgia and Kelsey for probably about another hour. Kelsey asked me if her friend could stay the night, and I said sure. So all three of us went back to our home. And as I was rounding the corner of my street, I saw Cy on his hands and knees at my front door with Wayne pointing a gun at him. I knew immediately that I needed to protect my family. I reached into my glove box, I grabbed my gun, and I told the girls to sit down and not to move. I got out of the car, I held the gun in that direction, and I called the police.
Hi, I need a police officer as soon as possible. I'm making
Hold on.
an arrest right now.
You can't make a citizen's arrest.
Yes, I've already been informed that I can. I have an ongoing case against this person.
Ma'am.
Get down! Get down!
Who is this man to you?
He is my ex-husband.
On June 28, 2017, Jennifer Provoznik is visiting friends who live down the street from where Amanda and Wayne live.
I work in law enforcement, and it's my day off, so I just wanted to really enjoy my day with my friends.
They are oblivious to the scene unfolding a couple of yards away.
My name is Amanda Harris. I've been down there many times to tell you guys what's going on. He's been told by the police to stay away many, hundreds of times.
Do you have a weapon right now?
My husband and I both have a weapon.
Okay, I'm going to need you to put that weapon up, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay, you and your husband both.
Wayne, he wants you to put your weapon down.
Does this other male have a weapon?
I have no idea.
From inside the car, 11-year-old Kelsey also calls 911.
Send him over right now, please.
What's going on?
My mom's ex-husband, he literally stalks us and he's at our house right now. My parents are yelling at him right now. It's done. I'm sorry. I'm just really scared.
I'm getting help for you. Stay on the line.
And I hear 3 distinct gunshots and a woman screaming. So at this time, my training kicks in, and I told my friend, I was like, listen, call 911. I'm going down there.
I had been shot, but I didn't know it. It was all so surreal. I saw my husband fall to the ground out of the corner of my eye. And as I sat up from the position I was in, I was shot again. And I was laying between the 2 cars when I saw Sai's feet moving around the car and circle back to me. And when I looked up, he was holding a gun at my head, and he pulled the trigger. But it didn't fire. I had been saved by the grace of God. It didn't fire. And some divine force picked me up. And I got to my feet and I ran for my life.
I see a woman running into the house and slamming the door. And then there's this guy just standing there in between 2 cars, looking around. And he looks right at me and then takes off running.
Sai Ghosh gets in a car and flees the scene.
And that's when a little girl gets out of the car. She looks at me and she starts screaming, "Save my daddy." And I look down, there's a body in the driveway. And I was like, listen, there's a woman behind me. You take your friend. You do not stop till you get to her. Do you understand me? And she goes, yes. And so I sent her off at that point. I look at the individual on the ground and I knew there was no point of me even attempting CPR or any other life-saving matters.
All I could think is he's gonna fire through this door. And I realized in that moment that I had left Kelsey in the back seat of the car. I ran back out the front door and I was met by a very kind lady.
I know that she's wounded and she's also in shock. She's yelling about her babies being missing. She's also screaming, I knew he would do something like this. I knew it. And then she notices the man in the driveway.
She kindly grabbed me by my arm. And that's when I realized I'd been shot in my arm. And she walked me over to his body. And I was able to say goodbye to my husband. And they were putting me in an ambulance shortly thereafter.
When police arrive, they find 5-year-old Gemma and 17-year-old Nick hiding in a closet. That's when Amanda's father drops by on his way home to say happy birthday to Kelsey.
As I got out of the car, there was 3 or 4 policemen that came up to me. And the first thing they said was, Amanda's in the hospital, but she's okay. She's been shot, but she's going to be okay. And right at that point, that's when my heart just fell. And the first thing I thought of was the kids. Are the kids okay? What happened? And they said, yeah, the kids are here. They're with some of the neighbors that are here. And then I said, well, what about Wayne? That's when they continued to tell me he didn't make it.
We begin with that breaking news alert out of League City. A man police initially wanted for questioning is now wanted for murder.
We were the first news crew on the scene. We're getting there, and it's the chaos of the scene because you have a gunman on the run, you have dead body and someone seriously wounded, and everyone's trying to figure out what happened.
They put the hospital on lockdown because Cy was on the run.
I was, at her bedside the whole time. I don't know, it's like a movie, a bad movie. It was a horrible nightmare.
So as this statewide manhunt is going on, police had reason to believe that Cy was going to try to run for the border. And it was a checkpoint in El Paso. They were able to identify that Cy was trying to cross. There wasn't much of a resistance. At that point, even Cy had figured out that this was over and he was going to be taken into custody. When they look inside the vehicle, they do find a gun. They find several clips with bullets inside where the casings match the 12 that were found on scene of the shooting back in Lake City.
I don't know how I made it through. I really don't. But I have children, and they needed me, and life didn't stop. I had to get out of bed every day. I had to accept that he was never coming back. Thank God for my children. I stayed in the house until the trial came, and it took us 2 years to go to trial.
As the family tries to heal, Amanda assumes the only time she will ever have to encounter Cy again is in court. But she is wrong.
Well, one day I get this phone call, and I can clearly see that it's the jail on my caller ID. So I turn on the voice recorder, and I took the phone call.
Hello?
Hello?
I just want to apologize to you. I'm sorry for everything, Amanda. I'm really sorry.
Is this a joke?
No, I just want to apologize.
You almost killed me. Is this a joke?
No, Amanda, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I got scared.
Got scared?
I could not believe that I was listening to this person on the other end of the phone. How is this even allowed? Who is running this jail and allowing a murderer to call his victim?
I just want to pray with you guys. I'll put you on the phone real quick before we go to trial. Can I pray with you? Please, Jesus, please comfort Amanda. Please help me never harm her, never to cause her problems again.
Cy's staggering ability to keep harassing Amanda will even continue through the trial itself.
So I was charged with murder in the first degree, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, and stalking.
In the middle of the case, Cy fires his defense attorney and decides he's going to defend himself now.
But I know that he wanted to get me on the stand and question me, and that was his way of doing it. He was able to question me for a very long period of time.
Cy thought that Amanda was going to wilt on the stand. That's not what happened.
Amanda comes through this a hero. The fact that she does not cave, that she looks him straight in the eye and answers his questions. So if he wanted control, he didn't get it. He got to talk to her, but he didn't get the responses, the feeling, the control that he was seeking. So in that case, Amanda comes out a winner.
I don't know how the law allows your attacker to question you. How is that even possible? But it happened.
After the trial wraps up, the jury is quick to return guilty verdicts. And on March 5th, 2020, Cy is sentenced to 50 years in prison. He will be eligible for parole after serving 25 years.
I was disappointed because I feel like he should have gotten life without the possibility of parole. I truly believe that if he were to walk the streets again, if he were to ever get out, that he will kill me. He will finish the job.
I hope he never gets out, and all I can do is just say, let Jesus take the wheel. Even though I'm that close to her, I can't imagine going through what she went through. But we get through it every day. It's a process where we're all working through it.
I was angry with the police. I feel like they failed my family, and I think Cy Ghosh is pure evil. But there's still a big life to live, and I choose to just be happy. We have what, 40? I have 40 summers left. I'm gonna make the best of the 40 summers I have left. Wayne wouldn't want me to waste them.
Night presses against the glass like a held breath, and Seattle answers with neon. Rain needling the avenues. Sirens somewhere far, then closer, then gone. A city of docks and deadlines, coffee and shadows, ferries crossing black water like patient ghosts. On a Tuesday that remembers it was once a storm, a phone rings in a quiet precinct office and wakes an old file that never sleeps, a name scraped into cardboard tape, the year 2007. The words, cold case. The cut line, solved. But the silence around that word feels wrong, like a door closed on a draft, the kind of solved that still stares you down. You can stand at the rail on Pier 62 and hear the harbor talk. Chains groan, gulls heckle the wind, barges push their own weather. Somewhere below the surface, the city keeps its secrets stacked like silt. She walked these boards once, 23, grad student, night owl, archivist of forgotten things, the kind of mind that could follow a thread through a labyrinth and come back with the map. The newspapers called her promising, the neighborhood flyers called her missing, the case files called her timeline a flicker. 1 minute she's leaving the campus library under a sky that can't decide. The next, the cameras lose her to rain. No taxi, no bus ping, no ping at all. A corridor of hours with the lights turned off. The city learns to live with mysteries the way it lives with rain. Habit, shrug, onward. But some mysteries throb. This one did. The posters faded but were never fully taken down. Staples rusted into telephone poles like stitches that never came out. Her mother came every year and brought flowers to the edge of Lake Union as if the water kept a calendar. Her father stopped talking to reporters but never stopped walking the shoreline. Detectives rotated, focus thinned. Leads went brittle. A man said he heard a scream. A woman swore she saw her on a late ferry. A cashier kept a receipt like a talisman. Coffee, 11:47 p.m., 2 sugars, the brand she loved. None of it arranged itself into sense. The file grew heavy for its emptiness. Then, 2025, another Tuesday pretending to be ordinary. A lab tech feeds an old swab through a new machine. A hit pings on a lattice of probability. The past hooks into the present with surgical wire. A name lights up like a siren. Not a stranger, not a drifter. Someone who lived within walking distance of the library stacks, who drove the streets where she vanished, who bought coffee 2 blocks from where the cashier kept that receipt like an altar. The database whispers a match. The headline writes itself. Seattle 2007 cold case solved. Arrest shocks community. The cameras love the arc. The town exhales in pixels, but relief sits uneasy in the throat. Because if the story is clean, why does the air still feel smoked? If the answers are final, why do the questions breed? He is ordinary in the photographs. That's the part that stings. Hairline inching back, a jaw you'd forget, the kind of eyes that look down at receipts and never up at cameras. Maintenance worker in a lab building nobody notices unless the elevator breaks. The property manager knows him by first name. Neighbors nod at him with grocery bags slipping from their fingers. The arrest video is all gray sky and blue windbreakers and the pop of a door battering its own hinges. He looks stunned, then hollow, then, when he catches the flash, resentful in a way that reads as belief. This can't be happening. Or at least this can't be happening to me. The chief faces the mics. The city lines up behind him. Mayor, DA, the kind of people who get called officials when the news needs a plural. Cold case solved, DNA, decades, tireless work. His voice moves like a press release with a heartbeat. The mother stands off center, clutching a necklace with a charm that once hung from her daughter's wrist. The father watches the floor as if reading something only he can see. Questions go up, umbrellas go up, rain comes down harder as if it wants to drown the sound. It is a neat box, this version. predator hiding in plain sight, the long tail of science lashing back, a gap finally bridged. But the case file whispers a different draft. The cashier, the receipt, was that her night or the night before? The bus driver who recalled a conversation about a lost umbrella, was that about her, or did the city recycle its stories? The ferry anecdote, the scream behind the music venue, the threadbare rumor that a professor had a second phone, a second life. Shadows all, but shadows that know their way around. I walk the route because someone should. From the library's glass ribs, to the narrow street where the gutters hiss, to the light that flickers and never gets replaced, a campus cop points out where the cameras end, where the budget did too. Past that, you're in the city's blind spot, he says, and doesn't realize he's written the entire case in a sentence. Student posters stapled into new student posters. A band flyer over an economics lecture over a lost keys notice that stayed lost. The coffee place with the tired barista who remembers faces but not nights. He swears he remembers her, and swears he doesn't know which Tuesday anybody's talking about. They all blur, he says, then taps the counter twice as if to wake up the truth. The lab that changed everything glows sterile in photographs. Chrome, glass, a machine blinking its constellations. The tech in the interview says it like a parable. Time is no match for persistence, but even persistence needs a context. Where did the swab come from? Not from a body, there never was one. Not from a weapon, there never was that either. From her apartment, a doorknob wrapped in a bag, years after the fact, preserved because a rookie was stubborn and thought someday meant something. The rookie is now a sergeant with hair gone to winter. He stands in the back at the press conference, letting the city take its credit. The match, they say, isn't perfect because nothing in life is, but it is confident in the way that wins trials and angers a defense attorney into earning his retainer. The chain of custody holds. The threshold of probability is crossed. The story finds its villain. He denies everything. He calls a lawyer whose suit fits like strategy. He says he never knew her, never touched her doorknob, never walked past that building. The DA says his denial is data too, the wrong kind. The mother says she finally slept, then woke shaking. Sleep can feel like a betrayal when you've trained your body to stand guard for 18 years. I follow the maintenance man's last decade the way you chase a whisper. HOA minutes, parking tickets, a complaint letter about a humming vent. He worked nights sometimes. He had access badges. He swapped coffee pods with the janitor, according to the janitor who smiles with his mouth but not his eyes. He was written up once for leaving a basement door propped with a paint can. He said heat. He meant shortcut. He knew the skeleton of the buildings, the seams of the city where a person can slip through like steam. One neighbor says he kept odd hours. Another says so does everyone. One says he had a new lock last year and nobody else did. Another says that's because he lost his keys. The property manager shakes his head like he recognizes the chorus. Hindsight always sings, he says, but it's a choir of liars. The world makes pattern after the fact. It is so good at it you could mistake it for prophecy. Still, the pattern wants to be told. A man with a badge that opens places. A woman who studied patterns for a living. A night with rain. A gap in cameras. A doorknob that remembers a thumb. But solved is a verdict, and the heart wants more than a verdict. It wants a map. Where did she go? What happened between that camera and the rain? Why no goodbye, no stumble, no credit card swipe? Why no scrap of fabric, no crack on the pavement, no witness whose memory doesn't tremble when asked to be exact? If he did this, where did he put the time? Where did he put the evidence? Where did he put her? The detectives spin out the roots, the industrial underbelly with puddles like mirrors, the trail behind the soccer fields where the chain-link fence whispers with ivy, the boat slips that groan at low tide, water clapping their ribs like applause for something unworthy. A locked storage unit surrendered by a court order, boxes, a lamp, nothing with blood or story, nothing but the way the air changed when they cracked it open, as if the past had been jarred and wanted to run. A crawl space with dust that smells like resignation, a pile of maintenance tickets that would be boring if they weren't so close to the nights that went missing. He won't look at the camera, the man the headlines love. He won't look at the family either. He looks at his hands like they're a language he's trying to relearn. He says the word frame. He says the words police mistake. His lawyer says contamination, degraded sample, lab error, cross-transfer, 1,000 ways the modern world can smear itself onto an innocent life. The DA answers with statistics that march like soldiers. The chief answers with his jaw. The mother answers with tears that don't read the news. In the gaps, the city fills in its own headlines. Cold case breaks. Community stunned. Mystery lingers. People who never knew her buy votives and set them near the library steps. Someone paints her portrait on a brick wall and the rain gives it a sheen like breath. A student group starts a midnight walk initiative and prints safety as a verb on the back of their hoodies. A podcast does an episode and a half, then delays the rest because reality outran their script. A reporter asks the question you're not supposed to ask. What if the arrest is a story in search of a spine? She says it kinder than that. She doesn't sleep much either. I talk to the rookie-turned-sergeant in a diner nobody bothers to renovate. He sits with his back to the wall and his coffee cooling. He says the word luck like it's a sin. We caught a tailwind, he says. The lab's new algorithm, the old swab, the barcode that got scanned on the right day by an exhausted intern who didn't hit cancel when he meant to. He knows this doesn't make the math wrong. It just makes the math human. He stares into the steam and watches the year 2007 rise and vanish surface after surface. A call with the mother who would not let him leave. A shoe on a sidewalk that turned out to belong to someone else's Tuesday. A campus rumor that 8 weeks. I ask him if solved ever feels like a door closing. He says it feels like a door not slamming in your face for once. I ask him if he believes the maintenance man did it. He says belief is for church and games. He believes in evidence, and this evidence points like a needle in a compass he's followed his whole career. Needle to north, swab to name to cuffs. Then he adds something he shouldn't. I still wake up at 3 and walk the route. He rubs his eyes. He doesn't say why. There's a thing about cities. When they hold a mystery too long, they begin to carve around it, like a river around a rock. The shops remodel. The barista forgets which Tuesday was which. The library adds an entrance. A new apartment rises where an older one used to cough. But the rock remains, and the current that splits around it keeps the shape in the water. This girl's absence taught the city a new way to flow. The arrest does not remove the rock. It paints it. It gives it a name, and names are a kind of relief, but also a kind of spell. You can speak a name and feel like you've done something. You can also speak a name and wake something that was pretending to sleep. At the edge of Lake Union after midnight, the water makes its small arguments with the dock. You can see the city reflected and believe for a moment that things align if you look from the right angle. I lean on the rail where her mother leans each year with flowers. I think about how a doorknob can carry a decade in its grooves. I think about a badge that opens doors and a camera that blinks just before it matters. I think about headlines that call a thing solved because they have to fit the day into a box and move on. But the night does not move on. It waits. It offers its dark like a promise that it will keep. Behind me somewhere, a train drags a horn across the air, long and low, the sound of distance insisting on itself. In a cell across town, a man folds and unfolds a paper cup until it's no longer itself. In a small house on a street where the hydrangeas always look surprised, a mother counts backward from the year her child disappeared and tries to add sleep like math. In a precinct office with a cardboard tape label, a folder sits fat with years and thin with closure. Solved, the tab says now, in a new hand. I run my finger along the edge. Paper can cut you, and you never feel it until the warmth starts. The city can't stop telling this story because it's not finished, no matter what the stamp says. Maybe that's what solved means here, not an ending, but a place where the breath catches before it goes on. The rain works its way into seams, into concrete, into memory. Somewhere a rookie keeps walking a route in a dream. Somewhere a lab hums and believes in its own miracles. Somewhere a doorknob still remembers the pressure of a thumb, and somewhere the water remembers everything but never speaks. And the city leans closer because it thinks it hears a voice rising from the dark, a voice that sounds like a headline in a prayer. Come find me. Come finish this. Don't let solved be the last word. The second breath of the story draws in colder, the way a morgue does when the door clicks shut. But you're not here for warmth. You're here for the pulse that refuses to stop tapping under the tile. A timeline is a spine, and tonight we run our fingers down every vertebra, listening for the click that's out of place. She leaves the library. The cameras blink out. The rain turns the street into a mirror that lies. In one window, a television glows with a late talk show monologue. In another, a dog watches its own reflection and doesn't bark. In the alley, a delivery truck idles because the driver's life is made of waiting. She passes this, or she doesn't, or the city swallows the frame and says, try again. We try again. The maintenance man's name sits in the center of the table like an unlit candle everyone keeps refusing to strike. He had no disciplinary record that screams. He had no friends who say the word predator with the certainty of hindsight. He had a habit of quiet, which is not a crime. He had a toolbox that was always in order, which might be. Neatness is just another way to control where the mess goes. He logged overtime on nights that align with the fog of her disappearance. He said pipes, vents, a compressor that hiccuped and needed soothing hands. He did not log a route because routes were muscle memory and memory is not compelled to testify. Find the stairwell in the North Lab building, the one with the gum trodden into hieroglyphs. Find the basement corridor where the lights hum with that low electrical nausea. Find the service door he propped with a paint can. It leads to a cross-hatched belly of Seattle ductwork and steam, concrete sweating with perpetual weather. Someone could walk here and never be seen except by dust. Someone could learn the blind spots the way a thief learns the rhythm of a lock. He did. Of course he did. He worked here. He had to. This is not proof. It is a stage. What happened here is either fact or ghost. The trouble is both leave the same chill. The rookie-turned-sergeant points at a map taped to the wall, a spiderweb of routes and arrows and notes that have bled through post-its into the plaster. The city is a system, he says, and his voice is so tired the word system sounds like sin. Any system can be gamed, or it can break. He doesn't say which he believes. He drags his finger from the library to a cluster of buildings that share air without sharing permission. He says the word connectivity under his breath like an apology for how it might be used against us. She could have been funneled, he thinks, not abducted in the cinematic sense, rerouted in the civic one, nudged by architecture into shadow, then into a decision she didn't get to make. It happens faster than anybody wants to admit. The brain says path, the body follows, the city writes a sentence, and a human reads it. There is a rumor you can't kill, that she kept a secondary research stash off campus, old city directories and deeds, and a notebook with a spine so broken it looked like a wound. A friend says they met once at the diner with the red stools and the polite pie. She brought a box, pages smelling like sleep. They talked about a 19th century steam line that ran under a space that is now a parking lot, and about how the city's old bones sometimes show through its new skin when the rain is relentless and the ground exhales. The friend remembers how excited she was, the way her fingers danced when she traced the map, the way obsession can glow like health. What if she found a pattern someone else wanted to keep scrambled? That's a headline, a theory, a ghost with good PR. But it tugs. The arrest pulled other stories out of the dark the way a hook pulls trash from a river. An alum wrote to say he once felt followed on that same block in 2008 and ran until his breath was bone. A custodian remembered a set of keys that was missing for a week and then returned without comment. A professor whispered about a night she heard footsteps tailing hers and turned to see the maintenance man at the far end of the hall, hands in pockets, looking anywhere but at her. He said he was checking a thermostat. He said it softly enough that she was the one who apologized. She apologized to the air and carried the memory like a stone in the pocket of a coat she no longer owned. These are anecdotes. They are tinder. Whether they build a fire or a fog depends on who lights the match. He remains silent mostly. In the cell, fluorescent time drips. He is given a bologna sandwich that tastes like paper, and he folds the bread out of habit, out of control, out of the need to make something line up. His lawyer tells him not to speak to press, not to speak to detectives, not to speak to himself if he can help it. Words leak, the lawyer says, and the word leak slides around the room like a thought you can't lock away. In another room, the DA reviews the chain of custody again and again the way a diver checks an oxygen line. In another room, a lab tech stares at the confidence intervals until the numbers are scars on the eyelids. Their certainty is a brick road. The defense carries a sledge. There is a neighbor who says she saw him carry a long bundle to his car late one night the week after the disappearance. A plank, she thought, or a rolled carpet, or a pipe. She is not certain, and she hates herself for not being. Certainty should be easier than this. She remembers how the bundle bent slightly where a person's knees might be, and she flinches at her own imagination. She remembers rain that muted all other sounds. She remembers no other cars moving and the feeling that the street held its breath. She did nothing, because that is what people do when the world is not yet a headline. They file a moment into the drawer labeled odd and go to bed and teach themselves sleep. The mother keeps a ritual. She warms her hands around a mug and recites details like a rosary. Favorite song, the one with the quiet piano. Favorite cereal, the one with the cartoon owl. The time she fell off the bike and refused to cry until the neighbor boy left, then cried the ocean. The way she colored everything she loved blue for a year because she was testing if loyalty could be a palette. She adds to the litany, the new detail she hates to need, a name that fits the shape of her anger. She doesn't say it aloud in the kitchen. She is superstitious in new ways now, and believes that his name said in her house will carry the stink of him into the wallpaper. She whispers instead the word justice, and feels how it doesn't fit right in the mouth, too sharp, too shiny, a stranger to the tongue. I return to the coffee shop. The barista says he remembered wrong. It wasn't 2 sugars, it was 1. Or maybe the person with 2 sugars was the one with the scarf, and the one with the scarf didn't come in on Tuesdays. He laughs in the way people do when they realize their brains are not the vaults they want them to be. Memory isn't a camera, it's a painter, and a moody one at that. The receipt, relic of specificity, doesn't print a name. It prints coffee, time, price, a register ID that means everything to a manager and nothing to a city. We want the world to leave fingerprints on everything it loves and everything it harms. Sometimes it does, sometimes it washes its hands. There is a janitor who smoked in the loading dock and counts his years in nicotine gum. He says the maintenance man was particular, and the word sits between compliment and warning. Liked his tools clean, liked the carts pushed exactly flush to the wall, liked the idea of entrances that didn't ask permission. Everyone resented him a little, the janitor says, but not in a story way, in a Tuesday way. I ask him if he ever saw the man with her. He stares at the sky, a habit of telling the truth to something larger than a notebook. No, he says, then a comma in the air. But that door, the one with the paint can, it could get you anywhere you wanted if you knew where you were going. Then he stubs out an imaginary cigarette in his palm, a man practicing an old sin, and disappears into the day. There is a storage unit complex off a frontage road where the wind always sounds like a question. Court orders pry open one lock because the rent fell behind when they cuffed him. Inside, plastic bins labeled in thin pen, holiday lights obligingly tangled, manuals for machines that no longer exist, a pair of boots that could belong to anyone with size 10 feet in weather, no trophies, no gore. The absence is almost arrogant, or it is the ordinary mess of an ordinary life, and the story wants blood it will not get. The detectives stand in the metal light and listen to their own breathing bounce back at them. A rat scurries, or it's the sound of a paper settling. They leave with dust on their shoulders and the feeling of a punch that didn't land. In the years between 2007 and the arrested now, the case was a religion for a handful of people and a bedtime story for the city at large. People told it low and quick to scare themselves and to remind themselves they were careful, they were smart, they were not the ones who walk alone without checking over their shoulder. The cautionary tale sits right next to the campfire. You tell the story to keep the wolves away, and you tell the story knowing the wolves love the attention. The arrest should puncture the myth. Instead, it changes the moral. You can do everything right and still slip, because the city writes its own verbs, and sometimes those verbs drop you. A public defender fresh out of Hope Grad School presses the lab work into a stack like a hand trying to stop a nosebleed. He is good, and he knows good isn't always enough. He hires an expert to say the things experts say about partial profiles and probabilities and the way contamination is a poltergeist that doubles as a punchline. The DA hires a second expert who says the machine hums with righteousness. The judge will sit like a planet while these suns describe their light. Juries love DNA because it sounds like destiny. Juries fear doubt because it sounds like chaos. Somewhere between destiny and chaos, our lives sweat. I walk the path again at that same hour, a volunteer in another person's midnight. The city smells like wet metal and resolve. At the corner, the streetlight that flickered is steady tonight, as if ashamed of its role. There's a new camera where the budget ended, its lens a glass eye that promises to remember better than any human will. I pass the alley with the echo and hear my footsteps turn plural, then singular, then plural, the way a mind plays tricks when it's hunting the past in the present. A cat flickers out from under a dumpster and stares like a witness with no patience for subpoenas. I ask the dark the kind of question that makes people of faith and people of fact shake hands for a second. Where did she go? The dark exhales and tells me to keep walking. You collect the stray threads because that is how knots sometimes give. The professor with the second phone, or not, the fairy rumor that refuses to drown, the map of steam lines, the notion of hidden doorways, the campus cop's sentence about blind spots still ringing, the maintenance man's overtime and the way he put his cart so straight it looked like a rule, his neighbor's bundle, bending. The doorknob, faithful archivist, carrying a decade's pressure until a machine taught to dream about certainty translated it into a partial hymn. It could be coincidence layered upon coincidence until the stack resembles structure. It could be the only true story we're going to get, told in a language we are learning on the fly. On the brick wall where her portrait shimmers with rain, someone has written in small letters at the edge, "Find the map." It is not graffiti so much as a thesis. The city pretends it is random. It is not. It has channels. It has tendencies. It has the habits of water and money and fear. She knew this. She cataloged it. If you wanted to harm someone who knew the map, you would use the map against her. If you wanted to vanish her without a scream that stuck, you would nudge her toward the seam, the service corridor with its hum. the door that opens when no one is supposed to enter, the square of darkness that leads not to murder in a narrative sense, but to a quiet calamity where a life falls through a civic crack. The worst crime is often an exploit of trust in infrastructure, in brightness, in roots. Back at the precinct, a clock says late in red digits that look like an exit sign. The sergeant stares at the photo board as if it might blink. He pins a new printout, the maintenance schedule from that week, annotated, yellowed by the kind of light that ages paper faster than truth. He circles a time that touches the time she vanished. He circles a second. He puts the marker down as if it's heavier than before. He thinks of the mother's hands, of the father's silence like an oath to nobody. It should end here, with a neat blade of conclusion cutting through the fog. The script wants that, the world wants that, the word solved demands that. Instead, the night offers one more corridor, one more echo, one more rain-polished thought. Solved can be the way we say stop asking, or it can be the line we say before we ask harder. The city's old bones shift under asphalt when the weather is right. The map is not flat, it breathes. Somewhere a door that used to stick now opens too easily. Somewhere a camera that used to fail now sees too much. Somewhere a man sits in a cell and counts respirations like beads, certain he is innocent, or certain he is doomed, or certain of nothing because certainty is a luxury they took at booking. The harbor keeps talking because it doesn't know how not to. Chains groan, water erases itself and tries again. Ferry horns carry news between shores in a language we pretend we understand. On the pier, a bouquet leans in a jar, stems clouding the water with green. On the jar, a note folds rain into itself until the ink is a bruise. It had said her name. It still does, if you tilt your head and believe. The city tilts. It believes just enough to keep the vigil lit. And we keep walking the route, because the route is where the answers hide, because the route is where the ghosts do their slow, patient work of turning memory into a direction, and direction into the step you finally take. The city pretends to be asleep, but you can hear it counting, tires on wet asphalt, elevator cables sighing, the slow metronome of a crosswalk that no one presses. In that rhythm, the story keeps breathing. You picture her stepping off a curb as if stepping between frames of a film and never quite landing in the next. The rain is a veil, but veils have fingers, and tonight they tug at every loose thread. The library glass still reflects a scholar's patience. The service corridor still hums its low confession. A machine has already spoken a name, and the handcuffs made their statement, but puzzles don't retire when a headline clocks out. They become nocturnal. At 3 a.m., the sergeant opens the cold file box as if opening a chest cavity. The paper smell is surgical, paper cuts waiting in ambush, the kind of sting that reminds you this is a body of work and a work about a body. Yellow sticky notes overlap like scales. A scribbled phone number, a sketch of an alley with an arrow that never got a legend. The rookie handwriting of a younger him who thought clean lines meant clean answers. He takes out the doorknob evidence log and reads it again. The bag number, the date, the rookie's insistence, the lieutenant's shrug, the way time pressed the air out until the bag became a message in a bottle that washed up 18 years later on a fluorescent shore. His finger rests where the chain of custody could have snapped and didn't. That is either providence or chance, or a third thing we don't name, because it feels like tempting the dark. You walk the maintenance man's hallway in your head because you can't sleep. West stairwell to lower mechanical. Badge beep in a log. No one cross-referenced until a podcast annoyed them into it. The paint can that learned to be a hinge. The stopped clock above the sink in a room that smells like solvent and resignation. He moves like someone who belongs. That's the trick. That's the armor. A person who belongs is a person who can pass through the city's membranes without raising a hive. He knew which doors false alarmed and which doors didn't even know how. He knew, maybe, that cameras come with blind corners the way sentences come with commas, and that if you cut between commas enough, you can turn any paragraph into fragments. People call it random. He called it work. We keep collecting the weather around people because sometimes that's all the world leaves behind. The maintenance man's weather was quiet. He wore the same jacket in winter and in pictures, a gray that carried other colors easily. Siren blue, hazard yellow, rain. He kept a thermos, the way others keep a rosary. He stood with his feet parallel even when surprised, as if squares mattered. He waved like a man whose life had been a practice in not taking up more air than necessary. He is the kind of man the city stores by the dozen, invisible until the precinct printer spits his face and the news anoints him an archetype. Until then, he's just the person you almost thank when the lights stop flickering, and then forget to. The mother writes letters to her daughter even now. She keeps them in a shoebox that once held a pair of shoes she bought for graduation day that never happened. She writes about the hydrangeas, about the neighbor's cat choosing their porch like a vote of confidence, about how coffee tastes like the edge of a photograph when you haven't slept. She writes about the arrest in a voice so careful you can hear it take off its shoes at the threshold. I will say his name when justice says I can, she writes. I will say your name to the lake because the lake answers even when people don't. She folds the page with edges lined up like duty, and the paper remembers the crease the way a city remembers where it once cracked. He had an apartment with the kind of thrift that reads as a philosophy: mismatched chairs, a table with a story it refuses to tell, a dresser that used to belong to someone else's childhood. The warrant inventory reads like a haiku about anonymity: clothes, tools, bills paid on time, a radio with dust in its knobs, a stack of manuals as if machines were better company than people. No trophies, no shrine to darkness. Horror rarely curates. When they rolled the mattress, the floor beneath was clean. When they opened the freezer, it held ice that tasted like nothing, which is a tiny miracle in a world where everything leans into flavor, whether you asked it to or not. A story always wants a motive. The city's rumor mill is a ravenous thing, and it chews on the predictable bones. Obsession, slight, opportunity, the oily word impulse dressed up as explanation. But crimes of infrastructure, if that's what this is, if the map was weaponized, eat motive for breakfast and ask for the check. The sergeant keeps a second map on his phone, a private prayer book of stairwells and loading docks and exhaust vents that open into possibility. He marks places where a person could be rerouted by convenience. He marks places where the city's skeleton shows and a careful walker could tuck into its ribs. He marks places the maintenance man could ghost through, because who questions a ghost when it's carrying a coil of cable and a look of purpose? The lab continues its hum. Machines don't sleep because they don't dream, and humans envy that kind of flatness. The tech rubs a tired eye and stares at graphs that lift and dip like coastline. Confidence intervals are comforting, like recipes, though you still have to bake the thing and watch for the minute where it goes wrong. The defense expert writes a report that reads like a poem about the unreliability of memory and matter. The prosecution's expert writes a rebuttal that takes the rhyme out of that poem and replaces it with math. Somewhere in the courthouse, a judge's clerk bookmarks pages with a discipline that suggests she is the only person in the building who sleeps 8 hours. There's a night shift security guard who remembers a girl with a red backpack slipping through a lobby that locked at 10. She pushed the bar like a person who knows rules but also knows emergencies, and the guard was on the phone with a vendor about a camera that showed snow when there wasn't any. He waved her through without thinking, because that is what you do at the exact moment you are a human first and a uniform second. He says he saw her, he is almost sure, and he hates almost the way a surgeon hates a tremor. He had a family emergency that month, the kind that reorders your living room. He wonders if grief is an acid that changes the pH of memory. He uses the word sorry more than anyone asks him to. Find the Map hangs like a spell on the wall with her rain-slicked portrait. Someone has underlined it with a piece of chalk that the weather allowed to live. A graduate student with a mania for archives posts a thread about steam tunnels and permission slips, about the campus that expanded like a city-state and tucked its arteries underfoot. Another student replies with a map traced from whispers, exit doors, and maintenance rooms, and the way light pools and the way it runs. The campus police email the thread and ask them to stop sharing. The internet copies itself like rumor and laughs. The sergeant reads the thread like a confession he can't admit in court, and traces with his finger places where the paint can hinge could lead. We keep coming back to the doorknob because it is the only object that talks without agenda. It carries the weight of a human evening, the oil and salt that announces we are animals dressed as intention. The lab swabbed a groove, and the groove spoke. The groove does not know its own context. It cannot tell you if the thumb came at noon or midnight, out of malice or out of Monday. It can only say contact. In a courtroom later, a prosecutor will make that word glow. A defender will cup his hands to dim it. The jury will stare as if it were a candle we asked to be a lighthouse. The neighbor with the bundle bend memory doubles back into the story. She speaks to a reporter who listens like the city is a bowl and her words are water. She remembers new edges, the way the maintenance man looked over his shoulder first at the empty street and only later at his door, the way his car headlights cut a diagonal that made the alley feel tilted. She is careful. She says I could be wrong like a refrain. She is braver than the city deserves. The camera catches her hands and they move like punctuation. Comma, comma, period that mistakes itself for a semicolon. If you pull back far enough, the week of her disappearance blooms with near misses that feel like a philosophy. The delivery truck that stalled in the wrong place for the right 30 seconds and obscured a camera that might have caught a silhouette that might have been a sentence. The campus alarm that was tested that night at 9 and trained a dozen residents to ignore the whine that came back at 10. The power dip at a corner that blinked a red light into green long enough that a driver didn't stop long enough that a pedestrian had to pause long enough that a crossing didn't align with a destiny. Conspiracy is a greedy storyteller. Coincidence is the city's language. You find yourself interrogating the weather report like a witness. Was the rain heavier at 11:15, or did the cardiogram of the storm have a trough that allowed footsteps to be heard or mistakes to be made? Did the barometric pressure press decisions toward one door and not another? Did the wind flatten jacket hoods and make faces visible or turn them into shapes you cannot swear to? You know this is magical thinking wearing a badge, but people swear to luck all the time and no one arrests them for it. The sergeant marks a tiny storm icon on the map where the streetlight first failed and says aloud to an empty room, "That's where the night leaned." Record-keeping litters the trail like breadcrumbs that sprouted into trees. Maintenance logs show orders for a pump that wheezed and a belt that frayed and a leak that was half myth, half plumbing. Our man was on call. He could have been anywhere, which is the same as everywhere, which is the problem with men who manage the bones. A student housing supervisor signs for a replacement lock. No one remembers why. An email thread about a broken intercom stutters out mid-sentence. The last message says, "I'll swing by." No timestamp because the system was mid-upgrade and time hid in the walls that night like a raccoon that didn't want to be named. There is a professor who becomes a suspect in internet forums because the internet is a machine that turns curiosity into verdicts. He taught her once. He invited office hours. He sent an email that read, "Abrupt if you squint." He also wrote her a recommendation that glows with pride like a lighthouse trying to be literal. The police interviewed him twice and filed the tape. He keeps a rosemary plant by his kitchen window and waters it at 10 p.m. with the punctuality of a man trying to stand still in his own life. The rosemary doesn't care, but it looks like it does, and he appreciates that in a companion. And the maintenance man, did he ever notice her? The question is a hook that tears if you're not careful. A building card swipe puts them in proximity twice that month. A coffee line memory places them nearby, smell and steam once. A campus event photo catches the corner of a sleeve that could be his but might be a stranger's cousin's. He says no, not in a way that the screen reads as lie exactly, more as a rehearsal of a life where forgetting is protective coloration. He is not articulate with cameras. He has teeth a dentist would call honest, and a smile that shows up only when he thinks he's alone, repairing a thing that nobody else will notice because that is what keeps him anchored to himself. Competence. Close your eyes and watch her again. The red backpack, the hood up, the way she carries a stack of photocopies like a sacred text, the way she walks with the climate of someone who knows where she's going, which is different from arrogance, which is different from haste. The rain makes the pavement lacquer. The night makes her a pencil sketch moving through ink. At the corner, the flicker, the blind spot, the seam. It's not a trap if the city didn't mean it. It's a trap if the city did not mean to care. She turns where a person turns when a shortcut becomes the story. A door gives a little. A hum breathes invitation. An eye of a camera yawns shut. The map escorts her inward. We keep hunting for the moment of agency because justice wants it labeled. Did he speak her name? Did he offer help, the human honey? Did he simply appear where appearing is enough to redirect? An exploit doesn't require poetry. It needs timing and a quiet. He had both, if he had anything. The door that should squeal is newly oiled. The stair that should groan was replaced last month because fire code inspections are the city's version of exorcisms, and sometimes they work. A hallway is empty by design, a container for maintenance, which is to say for men whose invisibility is their uniform. He can walk 3 paces behind without triggering a story until the story writes itself. The sergeant stands at the water again because the water is a file no one can close. The fairies cut their stitched lines. A couple argues quietly because quiet never made anybody less angry. He pulls his collar up like a man who used to wear a hat when men wore hats. He takes out his phone and scrolls to a picture he shouldn't have taken. The doorknob bag, haloed by the lab light. He looks at the ridges in the metal, the tiny topography that caught a season and saved it. He thinks of maps within maps, fingerprints as countries, grooves as roads, the thumbprint as a city that never learned to sleep right again. He pockets the picture like a talisman he is ashamed to need. A city doesn't confess, it lets you overhear. A freight elevator burps open on a floor it wasn't called to. A steam valve releases with the sigh of a person who wants to tell you a secret and can't. A motion sensor light flares at 2 a.m. when no motion ought to be allowed. A bike bell rings in an empty garage the exact second you say the word lost under your breath. You start to sound like a believer, which worries you, which also keeps you awake, which feeds the map that the chalk demanded you find. You are not trying to prove a ghost story. You are trying to measure an absence. In court later, someone will ask the sergeant why he walked the route so many times after solved. He will say because solved is not the same as finished, and finished is not the same as found. He will say because sometimes the body of a case needs a second heartbeat, and sometimes the city gives you one if you keep asking, and sometimes it doesn't. And the difference between those two truths is the weight he carries in his left shoulder when the rain comes in from the west. He will not say that he hears her name when the wind drops at the corner where the light used to fail. He will not say that the map is starting to draw itself on the inside of his eyelids. The radio towers blink like aircraft warnings and also like bedside prayers. The night is almost done, which is when it plays its cheapest tricks. Your certainty softens. Your doubt gets teeth. The maintenance man dreams in a cell that hums with other people's insomnia. The mother wakes and doesn't know why until she knows exactly why. The city rolls over and resets its logic. And you stand at the seam between the library's honest glass and the service corridor's curated dark, and you realize the headline was a raft, not a shore. Seattle 2007 Cold Case Solved looks good in a font. It floats. It carries grief for a paragraph. It doesn't know where land is. We keep rowing. We keep tracing. We keep looking for the exact inch where a doorknob learned a thumb and a map became a weapon and a girl stepped into a sentence that never learned to end. The morning pretends to be merciful and fails. Seattle yawns into slate light, and the rain thins to a mist that feels like breath you can't get rid of. Headlines stack at corner kiosks like bricks, the kind people think will hold up a house until wind proves otherwise. Solved, they say, in bold that wants to be unarguable. The city gulps the word and tastes ink. Office kitchens hum with microwaves reheating other nights. Break rooms trade theories with vending machines to keep them from rattling. Commuters fold papers to the same creases until the stories memorize their hands. Somewhere in the courthouse, a stapler misfires and everyone flinches as if truth just snapped. In the precinct, the sergeant stands in front of the timeline that has grown too long to be a line. It curls now, a serpent swallowing its own beginnings, dates looping into themselves until the calendar looks like a trap. He pins another card, a maintenance log correction, small as a splinter and just as irritating. The correction shifts a timestamp 20 minutes earlier. 20 minutes is a lifetime if it's the wrong shape. His pen hovers, unsure whether to circle the adjustment or underline it. He draws a dot instead, one black seed in a field of paper snow, and knows he'll find it later the way you find a freckle in the mirror you swear wasn't there yesterday. The maintenance man sits in glass, courtroom clean, cuffs off, the ritual of balance performing itself. He wears a thrifted blazer that doesn't know his shoulders yet. He stares as if the middle distance owes him money. A reporter notes his shoes, wiped, not polished, because details have to stand in for story where story won't play fair. The DA's first slide arrives on the projector with a squeak of optics you feel in your cavities. Chain of custody, dates like fence posts. The doorknob's plastic cocoon enlarged until it looks like a weather system. The prosecutor speaks in a tone engineered to sound inevitable. The defense watches like a man counting raindrops to prove the ocean is unreasonable. You keep your ear to the city's seam, and it keeps offering noise that sounds like confession until you ask it to swear. The janitor who practiced stubbing imaginary cigarettes returns with a memory that arranges itself only after he says it twice. The night after she vanished, a leak alarm chirped in the sub-basement that doesn't have a sub, a sensor twitch that wakes a pager that wakes no one because no one believes that sensor anymore. He went anyway. He found a film of water that had no source, and a trail he will not call a trail because that would make him a narrator with responsibilities. He says he mopped quiet. He says he found nothing. He says he changed the mop head and threw the old one away, and he hates time for turning him into an accomplice to entropy. The sergeant asks what brand the mop head was. The janitor blinks like a man remembering the first lie he ever told and says it doesn't matter, then corrects himself and tells the truth. The brand is always the cheapest one on the shelf. The mother walks the shoreline at Lake Union with a scarf pulled tight in a knot that looks like 5 fingers. Ducks write nonsense in cursive across the surface. On good days, the water reflects a sky with ambition. Today, it mirrors concrete and the idea of clouds. She whispers into the collar of her coat the way people whispered in newborns in hospitals into the names carved in stone. She says, "I'm here." She says, "I'm trying to believe in solved without feeling like I'm betraying the part of the story that hasn't learned its lesson." Her breath fogs into punctuation marks the wind can't parse. Back at the map, an oddity blooms. The campus expansion plan from 2006 shows a corridor that was permitted and never built, an artery that exists only in drafts and arguments, a ghost hallway. The maintenance man would have known the plans whether or not drywall ever took the bait. He would have known where the ghost would have run had it been born. He could stand in a finished passage and sense the alternate anatomy, an architect's shadow blueprint beating under the paint. The sergeant follows the phantom line with his finger, feels foolish, then feels focused. Between the library's north exit and the service core, the planned corridor would have shortened the route by a minute and a half. A minute and a half is where fate likes to perch. At the coffee shop, a student with a laptop full of occult-looking spreadsheets, bus arrival variances, streetlight cycles, weather station anomalies, shows you a model that sings its own confidence. He has fed the city to an algorithm, and it has spat back paths of least resistance every night from 2005 to 2009. Rain adjusted, budget adjusted, people adjusted, like a choir tuning itself. On her night, the model glows with a corridor that isn't there and a door that shouldn't have been open. The student is careful with language. He says likelihood, not proof. He says corridor effect, not corridor fact. He says he wishes the chalk on the wall had been wrong so he could sleep like the innocent. You buy his coffee because it feels like tithing. The defense files a motion to suppress the doorknob. Not the physical object, the story attached to it. Chain of custody, they say, is a tightrope, and the rookie who bagged it once sneezed in the room. Check your own video. The prosecution files a reply that reads like a wall. Gloves, masks, log entries, ice-cold procedure. The judge reads both and looks like a person trying to watch two screens with one set of eyes. In the hallway afterward, the defense attorney straightens his tie until it looks like compliance. The prosecutor does the posture exercise cops learned before she was born. The reporters oil their pens. There is a rumor of another woman, not missing, no, life went on, badly and at an angle, but she felt followed, and not just followed, shepherded. The word chills because it wears kindness the way a wolf tests wool. She worked late in 2009, different building, same hum, the city's subterranean grammar at work. She says a door was open that never is, a silence inside it that sounded curated. She walked past because her life was not a horror film, and then sped up because it might be. She reached for her phone and found no bars, the dead zone every campus IT tech pretends is a myth because funding hates dead zones. She did not report it because nothing happened, because the story we only tell is the one with blood. She reports it now because Solve taught her to inventory her own unease. The sergeant writes it down like it's evidence because sometimes unease is. A ferry horn writes its name across the bay, a signature you can hear. The city answers with traffic and the heavy punctuation of construction trucks. Somewhere, a concrete saw screams the pitch of stubborn truth. You walk the ghost corridor route at lunchtime because daylight is an honest instrument. Students ripple around you, a shoal of deadlines and friendship. The seam between onstage and back of house is everywhere once you learn to see it. Doors with no welcome, vents inhaling secrets, keypads that blink a private code. A maintenance cart sits at attention like a soldier between orders. A wet floor sign stands lonely in a dry hall and means something only to those who know the language of misplaced props. The sergeant calls the mother to say we're still working, and she says, I know, and then hangs up because still working is the only sentence that doesn't cancel everything. He calls the father and doesn't leave a message because the father does not appreciate recorded voices pretending intimacy. He texts a younger detective to sleep. He does not sleep himself. He visits the lab again because the lab has begun to feel like a chapel where the faithful argue over candles. The tech pulls up the profile charts, and the sergeant traces the peaks with a knuckle, not touching the screen. People talk about smoking guns. The modern world hands you a choir of sighing needles instead. The neighbor with the bundle bend memory dreams in daylight and wakes with a detail stuck to her like leaf grit. The tape at the end of the bundle was not gray as she thought, but blue, the painter's kind. Blue tape peels easy, leaves no residue. The store near the campus sells it in towers next to drop cloths and brushes and a row of utility knives under a lock that staff unlock without looking. The sergeant sends a uniform to pull purchase records. There are no records because cash exists like a loophole with a pulse. He walks the aisle anyway and feels the gravity of mundane violence, the way harm buys the same supplies as household ambition. In the records room, the corrected maintenance timestamp grows teeth. 20 minutes earlier means the maintenance man's alibi is now a window into weather. He was downstairs when a door upstairs was logged as opened, not by a badge, by a push, a pressure swing, which means either a tailgating stranger or a door wedged, which means the paint can hinge, has siblings. The sergeant prints door logs until the printer hiccups and pulls a sheet in crooked, chewing one corner like a guilty dog. He smooths the page and sees it. A pattern of doors opening in a diagonal over 6 months, small, forgettable breaches that only align when you are willing to trace ghosts. He circles them like constellations only he can see until the heavens get crowded. The mother attends the arraignment not to see him but to measure herself against the room. The benches feel like pews from a childhood she left, and the judge's bench might as well be a pulpit. The prosecutor reads the charge and the words have the metallic taste of coins. The defense says the word innocent without blinking. It feels less like a claim than like a right both sides are obligated to attend. Outside, a man with a sign that says Trust DNA stands across from a woman with a sign that says Trust Doubt. Between them, the rain decides not to pick a side and drips from both. You walk to the portrait wall again at dusk. The chalk has been refreshed by a hand that knows the detail of the original stroke. Find the map has a friend now. Trust the seams. A student with a camera hovers as if waiting for the wall to say cheese. You watch her photograph the letters as if saving them ensures they keep their spell. A passerby mutters something about vandalism, and the student says, sometimes the only way to preserve a city is to write on it, and the passerby says that sounds like an apology dressed up as a manifesto, and the student shrugs as if both can be true. Inside the courthouse, the judge denies the suppression motion with a paragraph that will be cited in other rooms when the weather matches. Chain intact, probative outweighs prejudice, science speaks. The defense's jaw tightens, then relaxes, a hinge trained by habit. Trial date floats like a buoy the city keeps swimming toward and never reaches because calendars have their own storms. The sergeant walks out into rain that decided to come back and feels older than he is, which is the job's handwriting on his bones. A tip arrives the way they always do, voice disguised by caution, certainty disguised as humility. The caller says, check the South Service trench. No name, no reason, no history of calling before. The trench is a concrete wound that runs under 3 buildings and a patience no one wants to spend. The sergeant brings a team with lights and a philosophy of crawl. Spiders object to eviction. Dust writes curses in Latin. In the second 100 feet, a glint. Not treasure, modernity, a student ID card, old-style laminate, weathered, name fogged to suggestion. Not hers. Another girl, another year. The city's habit of misplacing. The team logs it with reverence because someone will sleep differently tonight. Then, 6 feet deeper, scraped by a boot, a thin coil of blue tape caught on a seam most eyes would miss. Blue, the painter's kind. It carries nothing readable. It carries an ache. The maintenance man's lawyer files another motion, this one to exclude the corridor talk as speculative, prejudicial, the city's myth-making creeping into an indictment like ivy. The DA answers with photographs of doors ajar and logs and maps that try not to look like talismans. The judge says we'll see, which is the legal version of a shrug that costs money. In the gallery, the mother's hands grip each other so hard they ache later as if she'd been holding onto a rail in a storm. At the station, the sergeant sits with the rookie he used to be, in the form of a young detective who is good at computers and doesn't yet believe in ghosts you can draw with paper. She overlays the diagonal door breaches with the expansion plans, with the badge logs, with the model the spreadsheet student offered before his nap finally found him. The layers align in one place like coordinates the city didn't mean to share. A pressure zone, a seam. If you wanted to steer someone, that's where you'd stand. Not with a gun, not with a lure, just with a door ajar and a posture that says I belong, and the quiet authority that comes from uniforms no one thinks to doubt. You stand at that spot before midnight listening. There's a tone buildings make, a key you learn if you linger. Pipes sing in D, vents drone in A. The gap between them vibrates your teeth. Footsteps above edit your expectations. A motion light at the far end does its one job, slow and proud. The door to your left is patient. A shadow moves behind safety glass that makes faces look like watercolor decisions. For a second, you can almost see 2007 loop back and lay itself over this minute like tracing paper. The red backpack, the photocopies clasped to chest, the hood, the pace, the angle of her shoulder that telegraphs intention. Then the minute snaps back. Your phone buzzes with a weather alert that says what every Seattleite already knows, rain returning overnight. As if it ever left, the city goes on pretending to sleep. The wheels of buses whisper absolution. The ferries stitch their routes like surgeons mending something they didn't break. In a cell, a man arranges his blanket to fit a rectangle that wasn't made for him. In a kitchen, a mother counts the spoons because counting is a language that doesn't argue. In a precinct room, a map waits for another pin, a dot that will make the constellation either a picture or a mess. And you, citizen, witness, narrator, one more pair of eyes in a city that hasn't decided whether to look. Keep your feet moving along the seam because the seam keeps talking, and because solved is a word the day uses, and the night has its own vocabulary, and somewhere inside it a doorknob still remembers, a corridor still hums, and the map, chalk bold and rain bright, keeps drawing itself whether or not anyone calls it by name. Dusk pulls a hood over the city and the color drains to graphite, the hour when decisions look like silhouettes and truth practices ventriloquism. The courthouse exhales its last argument and locks its jaw. The lab keeps humming like a disciplined secret. On the portrait wall, the chalk holds fast because the weather has decided for a breath to be kind. Find the map, trust the seams, 2 sentences pretending to be instructions when what they really are is a dare. The sergeant reads them the way some people read palms, lines crossing, fate pretending to be cartilage. He rubs the edge of the word trust and leaves a fingertip shine that feels like a signature and a smudge at once. Night school kids float through the atrium with backpacks like spare spines. A janitor's radio trades static with an old soul song that has learned to live with dust. A vending machine eats $1 and pretends amnesia. A student kicks it lightly, apologizes to the air, and heads for the stairs. The camera above the machine wears a new glass eye and watches everything with the bored precision of machines that will be asked to remember later. Tonight it will catch the reflection of a door closing in a convex arc, the kind of detail that becomes a cornerstone only if someone goes looking for it like scripture. Down in records, the sergeant looks for corners. Corners hold. Receipts, he thinks, not for coffee this time, but for machines that pretend they don't keep track. He calls the vendor, who services campus vending, and asks for logs. The vendor laughs until the sergeant doesn't. Turns out, even unwitnessable machines have diaries, service scans, coil failures, coin jams logged to the minute because money is the only witness that never forgets its story. The service tech ran a route the week she vanished. The report says he lingered near the blind corridor, that ghost plan that never became drywall, because coil B3 jammed on peanut M&Ms like sugar could ransom fate. Route time, 22:14 to 22:26. The sergeant circles the numbers and feels the night cough up a thread. He finds the tech in a strip mall office that smells like cardboard and corn syrup. A man with hands permanently sugared by machine oil and candy dust. The tech doesn't remember faces, remembers places the way mechanics remember sounds. He remembers the jam, that aisle always jams, too popular, too damp, and remembers the exit door sticking, remembers propping it with a mop handle because who wants to reload chips in a vacuum? He swears he closed it after. He swears the mop handle came out like a thorn finally freed. He swears the hallway was empty except for the air that felt like someone had just left. He says swear with the softness of a man who believes in trying to be useful. The sergeant thanks him and writes, sticking exit, mop handle into a margin that has already learned to speak in capitals. Back at the trench, they push farther. Concrete palms their shoulders, the air is a thick note you can chew. The lights carve a tunnel out of night and call it architecture. At 97 yards, a hairline crack glints like an eyelash on the cheek of a god. Blue tape again, a flake caught in the seam, like the city's bad habit of repeating itself. The tech tweezers it into a vial with the tenderness that makes you want to apologize for ever doubting science. On the way back, they find a glove, latex, collapsed into itself like a regret. The bag gets another label. The labels multiply like prayer flags in a wind that doesn't care. The defense files a notice, alternative suspect theory, the courthouse version of pointing at the horizon and dare-youing the weather to cooperate. Online, a forum coughs up the professor again because conspiracy prefers tenure to boilers. The prosecutor counters with a timeline that slaps doubts where they live. Badge logs, door cycles, phone pings like breadcrumbs that finally learned how to arrange themselves into a path. The judge lets both into the sandbox with a tutored neutrality that is either saintly or practiced or both. The gallery breathes in unison and then remembers to stop. A student filmmaker asks the mother if she can record her at the lake. The mother says no in a voice that doesn't bruise, then surprises herself and says yes, but only if the microphone stays out of the water because water deserves to keep some things. The camera watches her watch the surface. She speaks to her daughter like a person who refuses to stop believing there's an ear on the other side of this mirror. She doesn't say the maintenance man's name. She says the word winter like a diagnosis. She says the word solved and winces as if it's a shoe one size too small and she's learning to walk in it anyway. On campus, the algorithm kid can't let it go. He hand-feeds new data to his model like someone coaxing a skittish animal toward a bowl. Vending route. Exit door stick. Mop handle wedge. Door cycle diagonal. Rain intensity minute by minute from a station the city forgot to retire. The heat map brightens in a shape that looks like a mouth opening, then closing. On her night, the map's throat glows, an artery you can only see if you believe in Matt's version of ghost stories. He prints a grayscale that looks like a storm photograph and slides it under the sergeant's door with a note that says, "I know this isn't proof, it's a compass." Proof is everyone's favorite religion. The lab will take the blue tape flex and the glove and ask them to sing. Maybe they mouth along, maybe they hum, maybe their silence means purity, which is to say either innocence or carefulness dressed as nothing. The DA knows better than to promise a chorus. She arranges her exhibits like a skyline and waits for the jury to understand how cities teach their own logic. She adds the vending log because commerce never lies, it only omits, and omissions can be a kind of testimony if you keep your questions low and steady. The maintenance man dreams a corridor that opens into another corridor that opens into a room with no doors at all. He wakes with the taste of solvent in his throat and remembers the smell of a compressor that was always a little wrong. He remembers a leak that looked like luck until you saw the stain it left a week later. He remembers a time clock that lost 7 minutes every third Thursday and how everything in the building marched to those 7 minutes without ever admitting it. He does not remember her, he insists, because what else can he insist? Because the world has given him one word to live inside, and that word is no. His lawyer calls him a good client. In the hallway, the lawyer looks like a man refusing to hear the ocean. The sergeant sits in his car outside the campus at 2:11 a.m., because sometimes proximity is a strategy. He reads the vending logs and the door cycles and the weather chart on his phone like bedtime stories that forgot to tuck him in. He walks the seam again, slower, listening for the architecture's confession. The paint can hinge is gone, but the habit remains. Doors become suggestions. A new sign says, "Authorized personnel only," which is Seattle's way of saying, "Please don't be yourself here." Halfway down the hall, the motion light snaps on with the indignation of a cat woken by a footstep. He raises his hands to show it he means no harm. The light forgives him, grudgingly. At the far end, a janitor carts a yellow bucket that reflects light like a warning disguised as a joke. He pauses and nods the nod that hallways have taught, the one that says we share oxygen and a preference for uncomplicated nights. The sergeant asks about mops like a man making small talk with fate. The janitor shrugs. Brand is brand. The handle end fits any door shaped like a bad idea. He wheels away, whistling a tune whose title you can't place, and that feels important in a way that isn't. You decide not everything is a clue, then you write it down anyway, because that's what obsession does with your hands. In evidence, the glove yields nothing shareable, a cleanliness that makes the DA both relieved and furious because narrative loves stain and absence is harder to stage. The tape fleck is meaner. It carries the faintest breath of adhesive transference, too degraded to name, but enough to argue with if your voice knows how to be precise without sounding like a trick. The lab sends a paragraph that reads like a person walking a tightrope in a storm and still making it to the platform. The sergeant copies the paragraph onto an index card in block letters, as if handwriting could make probability less shy. Someone leaks the vending story. The headline that results is ugly and irresistible. Open door, open case. The talk radio callers line up like weather fronts. One says it's negligence. One says it's destiny. One says none of this matters because the real story is the professor who reads too much. A woman calls in and cries quietly because she worked late for 10 years and learned to count her footsteps between lights like they were prayer beads, and now she's realizing prayers and counting have different job descriptions. The host thanks her and moves to a commercial for tires. The father agrees to meet the sergeant at the diner that refuses to close. He orders water and forgets to drink it. He asks without looking up, "Will this end in a courtroom that feels like a hallway with better lighting?" The sergeant says yes without dressing the word in anything. The father nods as if he had been waiting to fail to be surprised. He asks to see the route. The sergeant takes him because some promises aren't safe to make, but some walks are. They walk the seam slow. The father stops where the ghost corridor would have been and presses his palm to a wall that never got built. He keeps it there long enough that the paint warms under him. He doesn't remove his hand until his breath learns a different shape. Trial prep eats calendars. The DA lines up witnesses like dominoes and worries which one will wobble. The vending tech will read as honest. The janitor will read as haunted. The algorithm kid won't get in because juries don't like math unless it wears a lab coat, and he only has a hoodie. The sergeant will be the spine. The mother will not take the stand because the DA believes in mercy where she can afford it. The defense will call the glove a ghost, the tape a coincidence, the doorknob an overachiever in a world of smudges. The judge will keep the rhythm. The jury will learn the city's acoustics the way people learn the inside of a new house by how it holds sound. At the lake, a wind arrives from nowhere and corrugates the water into a field of small, tense muscles. The mother closes her eyes and sees her daughter's red backpack like a flare in a world pretending to be grayscale. She opens them and the backpack is gone, because of course it is, and because that is not how vision works, and because living requires you to accept certain cruelties of physics. A rower cuts a line across the surface. For a second, the oar catches the light and looks like a needle drawing a seam. The chalk letters endure another rain. Their edges soften, which is its own kind of lesson. The city keeps writing its footnotes in puddles and steam and door logs and vending machine diaries. The sergeant goes home and stands in his doorway with his hand on the knob longer than a person needs to, aware of the way metal remembers. He opens and closes the door once, listening to the hinge. He thinks about how prevention feels like maintenance and justice feels like repair, and how both are only visible when they fail. He sleeps in a chair because beds feel too declarative. He dreams of a corridor he can walk forever without arriving, the lights blooming in sequence just ahead of him, the way motion sensors believe in you before you are there. Somewhere a student prints a flyer that isn't a flyer, just a date and a time and a place to walk the route together, a silent procession with cheap candles and a refusal to be alone. Somewhere a maintenance closet gets reorganized, not because of policy, but because shame moves people faster than memos. Somewhere a motion camera, the new kind, the kind that remembers like a jealous god, catches a rat dragging a ribbon of blue tape into a hole, and a facilities guy laughs, then stops, then bags it anyway, because city superstition spreads quick. Somewhere a jury pool sits through a video about duty and nods in the synchronized rhythm of people who've forgotten they can swallow without permission. And you stand again at the scene, because this is where the story asks to be told, because this is where the map whispers, because this is where the word solved reveals the slight tremor in its wrist. You press your palm to the wall next to the door with the new sign and feel the building's heartbeat. Pump somewhere, fan somewhere, the city's patience moving through pipes like a promise it keeps making. You imagine her hand there once, not pleading, not tipping a scale, just steadying herself on a night that didn't announce its intentions. You imagine his, later or earlier or not at all, warm enough to leave a decade behind. The air tastes like metal and a question. The ferry horn writes its name in the distance. The rain returns with the tactician's timing. And the map, chalk bold, rain bright, keeps drawing itself in the margins of the city that can't quite decide whether it has told you everything or nothing yet, and you keep reading, because reading is the only form of mercy the night seems willing to allow. The city resets its jaw and pretends equilibrium, but equilibrium is just the pose a storm takes before it commits. Morning leaks in through Venetian blinds that forgot how to be straight. Steam lifts off manhole covers like the city is tasting its own breath. The sergeant wakes from the chair with a shoulder that argues, the kind of ache that teaches you what years weigh. He boils water, forgets the coffee, drinks the steam as if ritual counts even when you mess the script. On the wall, the map waits, pins glinting in the weak light like constellations that don't believe in people. Find the map, trust the seam's glare from a photo on his phone. He saved the chalk like a parishioner saves a hymn in case the choir stops coming. Back at campus, the architecture practices its poker face. Doors close with civic politeness. Keypads blink a calm code. Students slalom through their hours as if the floor hasn't learned to hold the weight of rumor. The vending machine hums at the edge of the atrium, repentant, stocked, its glass immaculate, the way contrition shines when it's on display. The sergeant lets his hand hover over the keypad like a douser who refuses to admit the stick is guessing. B3 cycles just fine today. The machine forgets on schedule. People have to work at it. He walks a different slice of the seam, lower this time, where the freight elevators inhale pallets and exhale secrets. Elevator logs, he thinks. If vending machines keep a diary, the vertical arteries have memoirs. Facilities coughs up CSV files that look like rain translated into numbers. Door close times, travel durations, entrapment codes, technician resets. On her night, a freight car lingered at sub-basement for 91 seconds longer than the mean. 91 seconds, a minute and a half, and the remainder, the exact measure the ghost corridor would have shaved off the walk. A measure so consistent the city might be laughing. The sergeant runs a fingertip down the printout until the paper shines, and he hates himself for the superstition and circles it anyway. Freight lifts do not confess, they stall. There's a mechanic named Julio who can hear a misaligned guide shoe in a shaft the way a violinist hears a sour E. He brings a thermos of something that smells like cinnamon, and a stethoscope that looks medical until you see the magnets. He listens to the car hum the way you listen to a story from someone who doesn't like you but still needs to talk. See here? He says, palm flat against the panel, a whisper of vibration. She's got a shim that walked. The sergeant doesn't know if it means anything. Julio shrugs. If a man wanted quiet, if he knew which car sulks, he'd choose this one. It takes its time, and time is a kind of cover. Julio corrects himself. A mechanic of language, too. I don't mean your man. I mean any man. Pattern first, names later. The sergeant nods like penance. The janitor, with nicotine gum and a talent for regret, remembers something else, the way condensation gathered on the sub-basement conduit that week as if the building was sweating fear. He remembers a fan cut out and a tech slapped it back into virtue with the flat of his hand, the way infrastructure rewards violence when it's applied in the right rhythm. He remembers a ladder standing in no one's way but still irritating the eye, the kind of prop that tells you the room was rehearsing a scene. He says these things and apologizes to the air as if he has inconvenienced it by existing. The sergeant writes ladder left out in block letters and underlines it until the paper thins. The mother does not go to campus. She calls the librarian who used to save her daughter's favorite desk by dropping a folder there like a placekeeper in a church pew. The librarian cries in the way people do when they've been holding their tears like hot dishes, trying not to drop them. She says she found a book misshelved last week, a city atlas from the 70s, the kind that still believes in the romance of contour lines. Inside it, a Metro pass from 2007 used as a bookmark. Not her daughter's, wrong name, but the date hurts. The mother thanks her for telling the world to keep paying attention. She hangs up and lines spoons on the counter to the old pattern again because patterns are chores that trick the mind into thinking it's doing something muscular. Across town, the defense runs a rehearsal in a conference room that thinks glass makes it serious. Their expert, a man with hair like careful paperwork, explains stochastic contamination in a voice that could sell refrigerators to the Arctic. He points to a slide that shows how a touch can ghost across objects. He says transfer, secondary, tertiary, a chorus of qualifiers that make the world feel slippery. He says a doorknob is a social object. He says a chain of custody is only as clean as the dirtiest day in it. The lawyer nods, practices sentences in a mirror behind his eyes, tries on cadences like suits. Innocent is a thin word, he thinks. It needs fortification. He wonders if doubt can be upholstered. Night again. The sergeant parks by the loading dock because he trusts forklifts to tell the truth by accident. Motion lights blink in sequence. A patience game. He hears the elevator car whisper to itself. He traces the route from the ghost corridor's absence to the freight cage to the stair with the gum hieroglyphs to the service door that learned to make itself a suggestion. He counts breaths. He imagines the minute where a choice wasn't a choice. He tries to taste the air the way that night would have tasted and only gets copper, the metallic rinse of tired. A call comes through the tip line. Same disguised voice, same proposition without price. Check the condensate sump. Not the big one, the little bastard behind the west fan coil. People forget the little ones. The sergeant asks why. The line dies. He doesn't ask which building. The seams are a family resemblance now. He brings a maintenance lead who looks offended by the idea that anyone thinks he forgets little things. The panel unbolts with a sigh. Inside, a shallow tray where the building's leftover breath gathers until it decides to go somewhere boring. In the sludge, a disc of plastic no larger than a button, amber with age, cracked, hammered flat by months of being no one's problem. A lens from a cheap pair of sunglasses or a snap from a pack strap or nothing. They bag it like it's holy because the past teaches quick rituals. The tech reaches deeper, fingers fishing with grimace. His glove returns with a filament no thicker than hair, clear, glinting. Fishing line or the gut of a tag from a new shirt, or the thing that dangles when the world pretends to be tidy. It will be nothing, it will be everything. They label it like hope. The algorithm kid shows up unsummoned with a new printout and the shame of nerds trespassing on grief. He has modeled elevator lull times against weather intensity and the exhale cycles of the HVAC, a Frankenmap only the lonely build. On her night, a lull appears, a window where the freight car would make no noise to the hallway and the fans would mask the rest, a 1-minute invitation disguised as physics. He says it softly, as if speaking too loud will crack the math. The sergeant listens. Do you sleep? He asks. The kid smiles the way people smile when you ask about a luxury they can't afford. When the code runs, he says. The sergeant buys him a sandwich that tastes like floor tile and worry. In court, a pretrial hearing on admissibility turns into a philosophy seminar with neckties. The DA wants the door logs in. The defense wants them out. Are patterns proof or poetry? The judge's eyebrows do the heavy lifting. The DA says the diagonal breaches are not art. They're habit. They're the way entropy votes. The defense says you can circle stars and get a bear if you've decided to hunt. The judge allows the logs for context, a word that in this room means please do not get weird about it. The sergeant watches the maintenance man watch the floor and wonders if he is studying the tile because he craves a grid that promises fairness, or because he knows the grout remembers what shoes have done. The father returns to the route alone, an act that looks like bravery and feels like assault. A campus cop sees him and does the calculus, the man's age, his shoulders, the rumor swirl, and walks with him without asking. They pause at the freight door and the father puts his ear to the metal like a child listening for the ocean in a shell. He hears the building do its underwater whale song, the long vowels of fans. He thanks the cop without turning and says, "My head knows what the word solved looks like. My bones haven't learned it." The cop, new to everything, rubs his neck and says, "Sometimes the body is a hung jury." They stand in a silence. Both men decide not to measure. Facilities audits erupt because audits are how cities apologize without using the word. Doors get new closers. Cameras angle their black pupils at previously ignored squares of space. The paint can is replaced by a stainless wedge with a chain labeled "Training Use Only" in a font so sincere it looks guilty. A safety officer introduces a phrase that has the shape of policy and the sheen of prayer: corridor discipline. The report says corridor discipline like you'd say dental hygiene, a chore to reduce cosmic risk. The sergeant circles the phrase, not to mock it, but to memorize the way bureaucracies baptize sins. A professor in urban planning, gray ponytail, and tariff of patience offers the sergeant a lecture in exchange for the right not to be a suspect in anyone's browser anymore. He draws desire lines on a campus map, the paths human feet make that sidewalks eventually surrender to. People carve where they wish to go, he says, and the city either learns or punishes. In 2007, here, he taps the space where the ghost corridor would have run. The city punished. The sergeant has never loved a sentence that much and resents it for arriving this late. An email surfaces from 2007, archived in a server that wheezes when you wake it. Subject line, door audit findings. The body, terse, bullet points like dings on a car door. Among them, West Service exit latch fails intermittently. Recommend replacement. Initials, MM, maintenance man. The DA prints it on thick paper. The defense calls it routine. The sergeant sees a man doing his job and possibly building a stage at the same time and hates the equilibrium of that thought. We want villains to be lazy. It's easier to outrun them. The neighbor with his bundle memory tries hypnosis because uncertainty is a bruise she can't stop pressing. A therapist with a voice like a quilt talks her back in time, her words a current she attempts to float. She surfaces with a smell, citrus cleaner, with a sound, the plastic rattle of a utility strap, with a trivia. The bundle's tarp had a white grid printed faint in the blue. The sergeant finds a tarp in a campus closet that answers that description exactly. Painter's drop cloth, woven poly, the grid for cutting straight. It proves nothing. It proves proximity. He bags a fragment left behind where someone got impatient with scissors. He hits the wall with the heel of his hand. Once, quietly, a man refusing to create a second story that will bite him later. The maintenance man sits, eyes at half-mast, as if saving up blinks. A pastoral counselor visits at the request of a sister who married into a forgiveness cult. The counselor says the word grace as if it were a screwdriver that fits every screw. The man looks at his hands, marvels at how much they've done without keeping souvenirs. "I fix things," he says, and the counselor smiles as if the universe has given him a punchline. The man adds, not for the tape, "If I did something, I'd have put it back right." It is either the saddest thing he has ever said or a kind of monstrous liturgy. The counselor prays to an abstract noun because the jail has rules. A reporter chases the elevator angle and writes about vertical privilege, which is a stretch and a poem and a page view engine. Commenters perform their rituals: sarcasm, certainty, conspiracy. Someone writes a paragraph about how the city's class divides map perfectly onto who has keys to which doors, and they are not wrong and they are not careful. A groundskeeper prints it and tapes it inside a shed where machines sleep. "We've been telling them," he says to a rake, and the rake says nothing and feels misused. At the trench, they push farther because fiction has convinced everyone that the answer is always one more foot ahead. They find nothing except how heavy a light feels when your arm shakes. The tech curses the way a man curses at a slot machine that kills discipline. Then the beam catches a smear on concrete the color of old tea. A scuff, a brush from a box, a mineral weeping. The lab takes a photograph because photographs are how we pretend we can keep a hand on anything. Later, analysis will say iron. Later, analysis will say not blood. Later, analysis will say nothing at all. For now, the sergeant lets the emptiness sit next to him like a passenger who refuses to talk and somehow still helps you stay awake. Trial calendar pins itself to a date that looks like it belongs to other people. The DA's team rehearses opening like musicians tuning. Doorknob, logs, tape, trench, door audit, vending, elevator, lull. Each note true enough on its own, all of them hoping they harmonize so clean a jury mistakes ache for consonants. The defense lays out its counter melody: contamination, coincidence, city myth, alternative suspect with a university email account and moods. Both sides practice the cadence of Seattle: apologetic, precise, iron under rain. The sergeant walks the lake's edge for the 100th time because the water is the city's only honest mirror, and because he likes to look into something that refuses to look back. A rower cuts the surface like someone has somewhere to be. He dreams standing up, eyes open, dreams a corridor he has never walked, a hum that names him, a doorknob that warms under his palm as if metal could love you. He says her name once, quiet, into the mist. The mist keeps it. On campus, a building manager with a talent for shame pulls aside the sergeant and shows him a closet no inspector ever cared about. Inside, rolls of blue tape, the painter's kind, a pyramid of them like someone was stockpiling belief. The rolls are new, purchase order, recurring, banal, the way theory buys its supplies. The sergeant lifts one, feels the weight of usefulness. We use it for everything, the manager says, defensive, labels, hems, doors that float. He hears himself. We don't wedge doors. He hears himself again. Not anymore. The sergeant nods, hands the roll back like a contraband he refuses to christen. The mother sets 2 mugs out and then takes one away. She looks at the empty space where steam used to rise in twos and understands how absence can perform a magic trick, how it makes itself visible. She whispers a promise that doesn't ask the future for anything except to quit pretending it's not listening. She turns off the light and watches the room remember her daughter in the way shadow falls differently on things the dead have touched. She goes to bed. She does not sleep. She counts the fairy horns and pretends each is an announcement of arrival even when she knows it's warning. The chalk drains a little more color into the brick. Students touch the letters as they pass, a superstition that doesn't need belief to function. The algorithm kid, on his way to class, pauses without looking and sets his palm there too, like a person clocking into a job no one pays him for. The janitor wheels his bucket past and nods at the wall like an elder who appreciates audacity. The sergeant stands back far enough that no one notices him and lets the scene do its work. Cities heal in public, he thinks, by bleeding in public first. It's not noble, it's plumbing. And then a small thing that is not small, a work order from 2007 reappears in a digital archive a clerk swore she had already given him. Attached is a photo, not of a door, not of a leak, but of a sign on the west exit, "Please keep closed." In the corner of the frame, a sliver of a shoulder, gray jacket, the shape of a phone in a hand that has learned to make itself a tool. The metadata places the shot at 2219. The vending tech was still there. The ghost corridor would have saved 90 seconds. The freight would have sulked at sub-basement a breath longer than usual. The sergeant prints the photo and draws a rectangle around the shoulder. The rectangle feels like you could fall into it and never stop. The night gathers itself again like fabric, the fold that a seamstress makes before the cut. The freight lifts exhale. The vents sing their tuning note. The stairwell counts feet and stays jealous. The lake keeps its counsel. Somewhere a juror who will one day be juror number 6 tosses in bed and tells the ceiling he is available for truth. Somewhere a glove in a bag sits quiet, refusing to convert to narrative. Somewhere a fisherman ties a knot with clear filament and calls it a blood knot and laughs to himself for the impoliteness of names. And you walk the seam once more, because walking is a way to convince time you are paying attention, because the map won't finish drawing itself unless you keep your eyes on the chalk, because solved is a word the daytime insists on, and the night prefers conditionals. You press your hand to the cool spot on the wall where the ghost corridor should have run and feel the building answer, pumps tapping like a low drum, water moving like an old story you only half remember but still hum. The doorknob holds its century, the elevator sulks, the vending coil does its small dance. Somewhere behind the walls, a minute and a half invents itself again, an invitation the city has learned to rescind too late, and the root, that cruel patient teacher, waits for the step that will make sense of it, or for the step that only promises we will not stop trying to make sense, even when sense declines to answer. The day wears a clean shirt and pretends it doesn't remember last night, but the city remembers everything and lies politely. Elevators cough themselves awake, keypads rehearse their blinks. The atrium glass polishes the morning into an alibi. On the sergeant's desk, the photo with the shoulder sits under a paperweight like a hostage who might start talking if the room gets warmer. 2219, the vending tech's window, the sign that begs, and the door that didn't know how to listen. The rectangle around the gray sleeve is a trap door in the mind. Every time he looks at it, he falls and has to climb out using only questions. He takes the picture to facilities because buildings confess best to the people who scold them. A supervisor with a carpenter's thumb studies the sleeve the way woodworkers study grain. Uniform, not uniform, he says, weighing the fabric with his eyes. That jacket came from a bin. Half the guys wear them when they don't want to ruin their good coat. The sergeant slides the photo closer and points at the phone-shaped bulge. Work phone? The supervisor shakes his head. Back then, we had one shared flip for the crew. Lived in the toolbox. You signed it out like it was a crown. He looks at the photo again and adds something he doesn't have to. Could be anybody. The vending tech returns with a memory that won't behave. He thinks he propped the west exit, yes, because the compressor wheezed and he liked a draft. But he cannot swear to his own habits now that the city has turned them into law. He draws a map of the mop handle wedge with a candy sticky finger on the back of a receipt. The drawing looks like a key. The sergeant pockets it, not because it's useful, but because you take souvenirs from the parts of a case that won't let you look away. Records coughs up another digest of numbers, badge pings in adjacent buildings, not damning, not clean, just human. The maintenance man's ID swiped the north cage at 2157 and the east utilities door at 2231. Between those times, a freckle of entries from other staff scribble across the logs like static. Could he piggyback? The DA asks across a speakerphone that adds distance to everything. He wouldn't need to, the sergeant says. He knew the doors that don't ask. The DA goes quiet, the way a person goes quiet when she agrees but can't spend that agreement in the courtroom. The janitor with the nicotine gum hears that the court date is set and shows up with a small confession he doesn't know how to hold. He kept a box, not evidence, not treasure, lost and found for the unglamorous, badges retired and never claimed, keys with teeth too odd to throw away, sleeves from busted raincoats, a grocery loyalty card for a store that died, a lanyard sun-bleached pail. He pushes it across the table the way a man offers an apology. The sergeant sifts. Near the bottom, a plastic clip with blue residue, the painter's tape kind, wrapped around the hinge like a fix someone forgot to undo. He labels it with a number because that is how you turn guilt into work. At Lake Union, a volunteer crew strings paper lanterns on a night that deserves a softer light. Students, neighbors, people from nowhere in particular who live here anyway. The mother watches from the rail with a face that has learned to let strangers try to be kind. A girl in a green jacket hands her a marker and asks if she wants to write something on a lantern. She writes nothing. She draws a square, a floor plan in miniature that only she understands. When the lanterns lift, the square goes with them. The water holds the glow until the rain decides it prefers a darker mirror. On campus, the algorithm kid receives an email from a building engineer who is tired of feeling invisible. The engineer sends a spreadsheet that looks like homework for a god. Fan coil cycles, chilled water demand, dampers yawning, then shutting as the building breathes. He has highlighted a dip at 2218 on the night that keeps teaching the city its own history. Negative pressure in the West Service Corridor, the note says. Door pops easier when the building exhales like this. The kid prints, circles, crosshatches, his pencil turning probability into art. He brings it to the sergeant like a cat dragging a ribbon and trying not to meow. The defense's investigator knocks on doors that used to open for pizza and now open for doubt. He visits the professor with the rosemary plant and leaves with a calm alibi and a cutting of rosemary because the professor can't help himself. He asks the barista to perform coffee memory for the 100th time and receives a sermon on the unreliability of humans delivered with the dignity of a man polishing a portafilter. He asks an old classmate of hers about a rumor that she owed a debt and gets laughter that doesn't understand it's an answer. He builds a storyboard of nothings and tapes them to a wall until the wall seems to vibrate with the effort of failing to make sense. The sergeant walks the seam and feels the building's new vigilance. Doors stiff with fresh closers, cameras that stare without blinking, signs that shout. The ghost corridor still refuses to exist, and yet everyone steps around it like a puddle. He stops at the west exit and breathes with the building. In. The negative pressure tugs his jacket. Out. The handle settles. On the third exhale, he hears footsteps he didn't make. A student with a cello slides past, balancing the instrument like a second spine. Music rooms keep late hours. Grief does too. The student nods. The sergeant nods back and imagines the cello bow drawing a straight line through the air, a corridor only sound can use. The courthouse creaks toward trial in the manner of old ships leaving harbor, ceremony disguising peril. Jury selection invents a small city inside a larger one and asks it to know how to listen. The DA watches faces the way a meteorologist watches clouds. Who believes in machines? Who distrusts them but loves their phones? Who thinks maintenance is a job and who thinks it's a cover? The defense marks the ones who like headlines too much and the ones who don't read at all. The sergeant sits in the back row and tries not to assign anyone a role, fails, and tries again. A photographer from the college paper brings the sergeant prints from a forgotten folder. Night shift window shots, reflections mostly, students ghosting through glass, the city editing their edges. In one frame, the west exit sign appears in the corner, backwards in reflection, De Solp Peak SALP. The open door looks closed in the glass. The closed looks open. The sergeant stares at the reversal until his eyes complain. He files the print under T for tricks of light because sometimes the universe volunteers a metaphor and you don't have the heart to reject it. Another tip call. Same flattened voice, a rhythmic, like a metronome fixed by a drunk. Roof drains. No one ever checks the roof drains. The sergeant, who has learned to take the city at its word when it lies, brings a ladder, a facilities lead, a young detective with knees that don't negotiate. The roof drains are bowls collecting what the weather forgets, filtered by a screen that keeps the worst of the world out and the interesting bits in. Leaves, gravel, a dead bee. In one bowl, a scrap of plastic with a curve, a lens from cheap sunglasses if you want it to be. In another, a fleck of red weave. Backpack shade red, campus red, random red. The lab will tell him everything it can, and the rest he will have to live with. They bag, label, promise their bodies to gravity on the way down. The maintenance man sits across from his lawyer and practices being understandable. "You never propped a door?" the lawyer asks. "Everybody props a door," he says, and then flinches like he slapped himself. They adjust. He says, "I follow procedure." They adjust again. He says, "I followed procedure then, as far as I remember." He tries on sincerity the way a man tries on a jacket, one size too close to the truth. The lawyer closes his eyes and hears the jury's questions arriving like rain. A woman from another building, farther south, different disciplines, same hum in the walls, brings the sergeant a story about lights that made decisions without her. She says at 22:20 one night, long after 2007, her hallway flickered in sequence, a wave traveling away from a door that should have been asleep. She followed the wave because curiosity is a muscle built in grad school. It led to a stairwell that smelled like cut PVC and a voice that said sorry in a tone that meant don't remember me. She did not report because she made it home alive and the city teaches you to grade on a curve. She reports it now. The sergeant writes, "Wave of lights, sorry voice." He underlines sorry because the ones who apologize are often the ones who know they don't have to. The algorithm kid finds a pattern in the elevator lull across semesters. Finals week elevates entropy. Machines and people both overheat. He writes code to weight stress. The map shifts slightly, the bright lane still bright, the minute and a half still greedy. He emails a graph that looks like a heartbeat thinking. The sergeant prints it, pins it near the photo with the gray sleeve, and doesn't know if he has built a shrine or a dashboard. A maintenance scheduler, a woman who measures her days and calls nobody thanks her for, produces a 2007 shift swap. The maintenance man traded a Tuesday with a colleague so he could attend to a personal appointment. She does not know what appointment. The colleague is dead, the kind of death no one suspects, ordinary, earned, sad. The scheduler's eyes shine with the guilty power of memory that costs nothing and buys everything. The sergeant adds the swap to the spine, watches the date slide like a bead. Tuesday to Tuesday. The same rain, the same hour. He does not breathe until he writes it down. In a basement classroom, the urban planning professor draws desire lines again, but this time the chalk squeaks and the students wince and he smiles at the pedagogy of discomfort. "We fix what people insist on doing," he says. And the sergeant, who sits in the back like a man hiding from his younger self, hears, "We fix what people insist on being." Outside, a groundskeeper chalks arrows for an event and wipes them away with his boot when he's done. The rain does the rest. The campus keeps practicing impermanence. The trench yields nothing new, and that is its own news. The team debates whether nothing is a kind of mercy or a style of cruelty. The sergeant adds one more yard anyway because quitting at almost is a superstition he refuses to adopt. They find a penny black with years. Tails, Liberty's hair matted with mud. He slides it into his pocket and decides he will spend it on coffee and perhaps trick the day into giving him change in luck. The DA rehearses opening to a near-empty room, words falling into chairs and bouncing. "This case is not about spectacle," she says to the silence. "It's about how a city's seams can be exploited by someone who knows the stitch. It's about a doorknob that remembered, a door that forgot, and a timeline that once aligned points to one person with the keys and the habit." She pauses where the jury's eyes will blink. She knows they will want more. She knows more may not be possible. She tells the truth anyway, which is the job on days when the job still makes sense. The defense polishes doubt like a lens. "This case is about overreach," he will say. "About a machine that loves to be right and a story that loves to be told. About corridors that exist only in the hearts of people who have walked them too often in their sleep." He will look at the maintenance man as if to remind everyone that the world prefers culprits who look like headlines, and this man looks like Tuesday. He will say the word contamination gently, like a favor. He will say the word coincidence as if daring the jury to admit they've said it too when life insisted. At the lake, the lanterns have come down, the wires coiled like careful snakes. The mother stands with the father and watches a ferry write its line. They do not touch. Their griefs learned to live in separate rooms for survival and then forgot the path back. He says without preface, when the door signs came down the year after, I kept one. He looks embarrassed by his own sentimentality. It's in the garage behind the Christmas bins. I don't know why I kept it. She nods as if he has confessed something criminal and brave. Maybe you knew we'd need proof that the building once asked for kindness. He snorts softly. Buildings always ask. We're the ones who answer late. The sergeant receives a final email before trial that is not a tip or a threat or a prayer. It is a download link from facilities tagged Quiet Cam. A camera installed after everything, pointed at nothing anyone cared about until now. The west exit reflection in a piece of art glass that bends the world into commas. The footage is 2 weeks old, midnight. A door opens and closes without anyone in frame. Pressure breathing, building exhale. Then a figure, gray sleeve, not his, not ours, not 2007, a new Tuesday rehearsing an old verb. The figure pushes, tests, learns the rhythm in 6 tries, walks away. The sergeant freezes the frame, prints it, pins it next to the 2219 shoulder. 2 rectangles, 2 gray commas, 2 hands learning the same sentence years apart. He has the sudden vertigo of a man who realizes the map was never personal. It was a public invitation that predators recognize in any decade. Night again. The atrium holds its glass breath. The vending hum softens as if trying not to be heard thinking. The freight elevator sulks, Shim still walking its private mile. The janitor wheels past, whistling the tune you finally place. It's the one the fairies use when they talk to each other in fog. The chalk letters on the wall blur just enough to look like weathered commandments. Find the map, trust the seams. A third hand has added a third line, smaller, almost embarrassed by its own wisdom. Fix what people insist on doing. You stand at the seam one more time, palm on paint, counting the building's pulse. You taste the nickel of the rail in the air. You hear a voice from some hallway say sorry in a tone that refuses to be a face. You say her name, not as an invocation, not as an argument, just as a fact that outlasts architecture. The word solved waits on the courthouse calendar like a bell that will ring no matter who deserves silence. The city keeps breathing. The map keeps writing itself, chalk soft, rain stubborn, and you keep reading, because reading is how you walk without moving, and because somewhere a doorknob still holds a decade like heat, and somewhere a door still pretends it never learned to open for the wrong kind of belonging, and somewhere the corridor hums, practicing the note that will either be a warning or an echo, depending on whether anyone believes it in time.